Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Adwukta.
This is Merps. We got a long podcast up ahead. Strap yourselves in. We got a lot of cards to talk about, and we have big changes coming up inside of the arena.
Yeah, it's gonna be a great Lightforge, and it's gonna be a long Lightforge. So because we have an event. It is coming up. It was announced right after the last Lightforge because that's how Blizzard likes to do things, and it is going to happen now. We're talking like it's already happened in Asia as we're broadcasting here. It's going to happen in the EU, probably in the middle of this podcast, and it's going to happen in NA in the middle of the night tonight. So we will get all these new cards and all the scores up on the tier list with that giant update I keep talking about up overnight. But we thought we'd preview the cards for you right now. And some people have already gotten to play with the cards a little if you're playing on the Asia servers. So hopefully our preview scores matches your expectations. These scores are not from any like actual experience. Neither of us have played a run in Asia yet. But you know, they're cards. We review cards before playing with them all the time. These are no different. They're a little crazier, but generally we feel pretty confident with our scores.
Yeah. Anyways, look, we have a lot of new cards, but before that, I want to talk about the leaderboards that just came out. We are in June, but the May leaderboards, the May 2018 leaderboards just came out. A lot of familiar faces, but number one in North America for May was Tachi, who you just had on with a co-op, right? And it's Tachi with 9.07. Huge congrats to Tachi. That's a ridiculous average. So
it's great. So Tachi Dirk was talking about how he last month he had a really good result and he did a lot of shaman runs. It was really great, and it was like averaging over 10 wins per run. And so I was like, I'll get you on for a coup. And he's like, yeah, I'm ready right now. And we go 1-3. So this is my effect on the number one NA player when it comes to shaman.
Yeah, definitely.
I lower the average to 10% of what less than 10% of what the average normally is.
That takes a lot of skill. That takes a lot of persuasion. That takes a lot of wow. You are the heaviest anchor that there is. But one thing I want to say, and hopefully, this gives some perspective as well. This is what I heard, and people made comments about this as well. But one of the comments, they obviously congratulated Tachi, but they were just like, hey, I remember when, the leaderboards first came out, which is only like a year and a half ago, right? Less than a year and a half ago, essentially. They remembered Tachi as someone who was very soft infinite, right? Who was very soft infinite, who was like, low 6+ wins per run. And Tachi, if you're listening and I'm miscategorizing, I'm sorry, but
yeah, shit on old Tachi.
I know, but they were just saying how Tachi is someone who posts a lot on Arena HS and who you can tell even through the forums played a lot, committed himself a lot to the game, and it's really nice to see the progression, right? We've seen this with people like Isherwood, we've seen this with people like Dreads. And for those of you out there who, and look, I know they're like, wait, but he started as soft infinite. That's already like pretty good. But it's that last step that's really hard, right?
There's a big difference between soft infinite and number one NA.
Definitely.
Just a little bit.
Just a tiny bit. And, I know a little bit something about that too. It's been like a year, but, I still know a little bit of something. So for those of you out there, whether you're at 3 wins trying to get to 5 wins, 5 wins trying to get to 6.5, 6.5 trying to get to number one NA, we've seen quite a few people do that, So I think this is just a great example. But on the flip side, we go to number 2 and we see a familiar face. It's Lettuce King, which is Crip's account. I like his name. And Tachi narrowly edged out Crip by a score of 9.07 to 8.97. So congratulations to Crip as well. And then just going down the top 10, we have Maximus, Zeist, Zamos. We have Dreads at number 6, someone we just mentioned. Paper Roller at 7. Amaz at number 8. Jin Khan at number 9, and Static Kitty at 10. We also have a lot of other familiar faces on here as well. We have Hafu at 22, Tex at 29, Sun Glitters at 32. I don't.
Probably more people on there we should give shout outs to, but it goes up to 150. It's a long list.
Right. So huge congrats to them. And I think it just goes to show that, the people that put a lot of time into it, and who really commit themselves, like we talk about RNG a lot, but at the end of the day, this is, like over 30 runs, it's very, very consistent.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
And on the EU side, we see a little bit more of this. So number one in EU, congrats to Jetty Master with 8.63. And at number two, we see Shady Bunny at 8.53. Great average. Number three, we see Elbow, another very well-known arena player, streamer at 8.5. And at number four, we have Educated Collins EU at 8.5. And I believe that this was the co-op run that Shady and Collins did. So Shady had a hand in the number 2 and number 4 spot in EU. Once again, showing, you can have some RNG, but
this kind of like arena leaderboard stuff happens all the time. We don't focus on it a lot, and that's because it's not every month that you see all these like top players on the top, and that's because it's not every month that you see a normal arena for an entire month that has a relatively stable meta. Right?
Yeah.
Like that just hasn't happened for a very long time. So we paid like less attention to the leaderboard because like an event's going to come up, right? Like we're going to talk about an event coming up here. These are going to be counted for leaderboard scores. And so the whole month of June, leaderboard wise, is screwed. Like who knows what's going to go on there. But when you have a very normal month in a fairly balanced meta that is kind of predictable, you will see the best players rise to the top, right? That's what happens, and that's what we expect to happen. And I think May was a very good example of that. Like you just see everybody that that's played like 30 runs in the month, right? Like up there because they are the best arena players.
Yep. So look, I hope this gives you guys some encouragement. I hope this motivates you guys to go for it. Maybe not this month. We have a little bit of craziness coming up this month, but bottom line, in July. Huge congrats to everyone in NA, EU, Asia going for it. It's not an easy thing to do 30 runs, the focus, the concentration, and I'm sure we'll see all of these people in leaderboards to come.
All right. Well, let's get to the what you've been all waiting for. We haven't exactly given the card reviews yet. You may have heard us comment on some of the cards, but we're going to split this up into 2 parts. First, card by card, for this new event, which is out in Asia right now, coming out in EU sometime during this podcast, and will be out overnight in the America servers. And it's nothing changes in this. They just added a bunch of cards, and from early reports, thanks to Dr. Stein, or at least Dr. Stein's estimate of it, is 100%, like plus 100% offering rate on these new cards. So we're going to go with that for now. Again, totally unconfirmed. This is just, people playing a couple runs, watching other people play a few runs, and then seeing what the drafts are like and what the opponents they're facing are. But it seems like there's one, definitely an offering bonus. I think that one we can take to, as fact. And that it's around 100%, like around plus 100%. So you're going to see a lot of these cards. And also, just a little preview. These cards are good. So you're going to want to pick these cards.
Yeah.
All right, and then after that, we're going to talk about the effect on the meta and game design and things like that, as we normally do. So without further ado, let's look at the new cards. Merps, do you want to start with the first? We're going to go neutrals and then class cards, as we normally do. So let's go to the neutral cards first.
Okay, what list are you using? I'm just looking at the 2 images they gave for Taverns of Time.
Yeah, but we're going to go down the list from our internal list that I sent you the link to before, and we've been, that list. Okay, so I'll start. It's a Temporal Anomaly. That is the first card we will talk about, and it is a 2-mana 2/2 neutral card. We're going to start with neutral. So these are all neutral cards. These are also all common cards. Or their rarities they have no rarities. They're basically basic cards, so they will appear at the highest offering rate. We assume they're still affected by the spell/weapon bonus or lack thereof. So that's That's what these cards are all. Anyway, Temporal Anomaly, 2 mana, 2/2, Elemental. When you draw this, add a random spell to your hand from your class. So, upon drawing this card, you will get that spell. You don't have to play the card to get it, and it's a 2 mana, 2/2, whereas normally if you want to get a card from a 2 mana card, it's a 2/1. So, very good card off the bat.
Really, really freaking good. Yeah, the fact that, so let's look at pros and cons, because we've seen these types of cards, for example, Shimmering Tempest, right? Or like kind of like a Swashbuckler Blink Fox kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like the fact that it's from your class, right? I've definitely complained about, it's like, well, look, when you mix classes together and everything, it takes away counterplays, right? Like if you keep on boxing them in though, like even though it's powerful, it's a lot of value, I kind of know what to expect. If I'm playing against a mage, I'm going to think I'm playing against a mage, right? Or if I'm playing against, a druid, I'm going to think I'm playing against a druid, not like a druid with warlock cards or a mage with like priest cards. So I think that's good, first of all. And then we talk about the interesting drawback, right? Of which you can't keep this in your mulligan. So that's like kind of the only thing that's holding it back a little bit. Like you can't keep this, otherwise you don't have the card. So you have to draw this in order to get it, which is interesting because it reduces the ability for it to have the impact that you want it to have in the early game, right? Which is, you drop a 2 mana 2/2 and you have an extra card, which is really good. But you're unable to do that.
Yeah, so there is a drawback, but and we have tier list scores for all of these, but we give them to you, but the whole tier list is changing, in that we've been doing this like update for like the last like month and a half, 2 months, and it's all coming together right at the time of this event, unfortunately. But so giving these numbers don't mean a lot right now from the tier list you may be looking at, and you could just find this on the tier list yourself. But using the normal concepts we put in the tier list, the new tier list is going to come out where Yeti's going to be at a 100, just like about a 100. That's not on purpose, it just happens to be that way. A Lich King ends up being around a 150, and it's still scaled off of an absolute 0 and centering on 100. So what this means is the average card that exists in the game is like if you get a random card, it will be on average 100 points on the Lightforge tier list, and your deck will end up being something like a 120 from what we've seen historically. The Temporal Anomaly would be a card that we rate like around a 125, so like a little bit better than the normal card you have in your hand, but not like the most amazing card. And that's for a non-mage, non-shaman class. For classes that use elementals more, they get a bump up. So that's Temporal Anomaly. And so if we'll sometimes put out like some the scores for these cards, and I just want to give you like a baseline for it. It's like Yeti's around 100, Arcane Intellect's like a little above that, Assassinate's around a 133. Lich King's around 150. Like Flame Strike is like almost a 200, Meteor's almost a 200, UI is almost a 200. It doesn't really go over 200 with the cards available in the current card pool.
Yeah, I think that reference is good for. So if you just want to remember, kind of like Yeti 100, Lich King 150-ish, and then like UI at 200. That's a good reference point.
And if you're wondering why I'm not giving you any reference points below a 100, it's because you won't need it for the purposes of these cards. Like 2 of these are going to be below 100. So they're good cards. And also we don't know how they're bucketed. We'll figure out how they're bucketed eventually, but we assume these are all going to be very highly bucketed. And to the extent that they're not, you should just pick the card because they're good cards, as you'll see. Anyway, moving on, I do have a correction to make to the stuff before that we were talking about. Taro's in the chat right now, and he's very into like figuring stuff out, especially when it comes out. And he had a theory before on HS, I saw it on Reddit. And his theory was that some of these cards, even though they look and feel like basic cards, and no one ever said they were legendaries, are actually legendaries, and will be offered with legendaries and not with like common basic cards. And he's in chat saying that that's actually the case, and I thought it was a silly theory, I'll be honest, because it's just like, why? They've never done that before, but apparently it's true. And I'm Morazond and Chromie are the two cards that are legendaries and offered in the legendary buckets.
Looking at them now, Morazund and Chromie do have the legendary thing on them.
What do you mean they do have the legendary thing on
They
them?
have the Dragon Wing.
Oh, is that what that is? This is how much
That's
I pay
a dragon
attention to
wing.
card art.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so they
typically
are
you focus-
legendaries. I see.
Yeah, typically you focus on the gold gem.
Yeah.
But if you take away the gold gem, they still have.
They
And you know
still
what?
have that.
I just noticed this as well. So it's not like a whole.
Oh.
Yeah. But yeah. They still have the Dragon Wing on top, which signifies legendary.
That makes sense. Okay, so it's not totally random. It's actually just something that I had overlooked before. Okay, well, on the bright side, the fact that they're legendaries is very good because these cards are very, very good.
They're broken. They're stupid.
And we'll talk about Morazon right now because we're just going down the list of neutral. So Morazon's apparently a legendary card, which makes it less stupid because like we have the score in Druid, for example. It's going to be different for class because cards are worth different amounts in each class. But in Druid, it's a 176. Yes, that means this card is better than Lich King, but it's not better than things like Meteor and things like Ultimate Infestation, where those are like more game winning and have more immediate impacts onto the board.
Yeah, and look, Morazund, this is one of those cards in which it will definitely depend on how you play, right? And not just like how you like to play, like literally how you play. Because all right, first of all, if we just take the idea that like the time, the time crunch doesn't matter, then this is like the best freaking card in the game, essentially. Because the only drawback is you potentially going into, fatigue with it, but you give up essentially, 3 total stat points, 3 to 4 total stat points, and you draw 2 extra cards every single turn from now on. It's insane. Plus, it has a dragon tag on it.
So we haven't actually told people what the card is.
Oh, yeah.
The card is a 7 mana 6/6 dragon, and it has a battle cry that changes the rule of the game for you, regardless of whether this card is alive or dead afterwards. And it says, from now on, your turns are 15 seconds, and you draw 2 extra cards. So every turn you draw 3 cards. So it's like an Alunith.
This only affects you. This doesn't affect your opponent. So your turns are 15 seconds, and you draw 2 extra cards. Which the effect of drawing the extra cards is insane, right? It's just absolutely insane. But how much are you going to be hurt by the time crunch? I make suboptimal plays with like the 70-second timer.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do with 15 seconds. Like, and I'm sure if I just thought ahead and then, really like push myself, I can make like pretty good plays in 15 seconds, but it's hard for me to decide individually how good this is. But I don't think anyone can say that this is anything but super premium. It's just how super premium it is for you.
Also keep in mind that Morazon will put you on a timer. You will mill yourself. You will start taking damage if this game goes on, because you're effectively drawing 3 cards per turn now, starting on the very next turn. Let's say you play it like in the middle of the game, you have 15 cards left. That means you have 5 turns left before you start fatiguing. And in the middle, some of those cards may be milled, but regardless of even that, it's just you start taking damage in 5 turns. And so if your opponent just has cards and like doesn't run out of cards for like the next 10 turns, your card advantage doesn't mean all that much, right? You just have additional options. That's all they're giving you. They're not giving you extra stuff if your opponent can keep up. Let's say your opponent plays a UI, or if your opponent just has a lot of card draw cards, or if your opponent just like plays really slowly, or if they're a warlock, right? Like, or whatever, right? If they can continue to keep up with you, all this card draw is meaningless. So you've actually put the inevitability on your opponents to win the game. So there are some drawbacks that make this card not like the absolute like, oh, let's give it a 300 because you win the game if you play it, like kind of like card. But yeah, 175 is as good as it gets, right? Like, beats Lich King, and in fact, I have a list here, and I think this is how I'm going to categorize cards from here on out, and it's going to be crazy and not crazy. And I think it's like 50-50 with this with all these new cards coming in. So Morazan definitely in the crazy bucket. This is a crazy card. It's like Lich King. When it comes down, the whole game changes. You win or lose based on whether you draft one of these cards or not, right?
Yeah, totally.
And also,
it's like the definition of a crazy card.
Yeah, exactly. It's a crazy card. This is not like meant for like. I mean, would I be like terribly upset if a set comes out and Morazan was a legendary card in the set? No, not at all. It's a legendary card, and we have precedence for this kind of stuff. But would I be upset if a set comes out and half the cards are at Morazan like levels of doing stuff? Yes, I'd be very upset. That'd be a weird game to play. No one would have a lot of fun. But that we're gonna have it for 3 weeks, and it is a legendary, thankfully, which is nice because I had not realized that. Okay, next we are looking at Possibility Seeker. You want to tell us what Possibility Seeker is? Another neutral minion. This one's not legendary.
Sure. Possibility Seeker is a 4-mana 4/5 dragon. So Yeti stats, right? With a battle cry that says shuffle your hand into your deck, draw that many cards. Now, this is an effect that we've seen in many card games, right? You know, this sort of effect in Magic the Gathering is extremely powerful. When we bring it into like Hearthstone Arena, it's not the broken mechanic that it is in Magic, right? So look, this effect, we gave it a slight positive benefit, right? In the Arena, you know, you can always wait to play it, and then the cards that don't really matter or that don't really make a difference, you know, you can then shuffle back in and look for your removal or look for your game winner.
If it's like later in the game, you shuffle even just like smaller cards in, right? Or like if you have cards that literally don't do anything against the opponent, right? Like let's say you have like an Acidic Swamp Ooze and your opponent doesn't have a weapon class, like that's a good card to shuffle in. Or if you like actually have just a very bad card, right, and you don't want it, it's Arena, you end up with some bad cards. You shuffle it and you get a new card. But overall, it's not a huge difference maker. And sometimes you don't even want to do the shuffle, right? Like you have a 5-drop in your hand. Who knows if you're going to get another 5-drop? Or like you have good cards in your hand. Why? Because they're the cards you haven't played yet. You know, like they're your like flame strikes that you're waiting on or whatever, and you have to ditch them. So it's kind of a mixed bag. We think it's overall a slight positive. So it's going to be a little tiny bit better than a Yeti. It also is a dragon.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's good enough. Like with these cards, and then because every single turn, you know, you have a little bit more information. You have like sort of you're planning for your hand, right? And whenever you play this, it sort of throws stuff up in the air, and then the awkwardness is always going to be there where you, like you said, you have the Assassinate in your hand, you have the Flame Strike in your hand, and you want to keep it, but you also kind of need to play this at the same time. So that does hold it back from being super good. But it's also a difference of like this card being in Arena versus Constructed, right? Like this card in Constructed, I can imagine it would be absolutely insane. Like when you can sort of tutor your way through your deck in a constructed format, then it just becomes super overpowered. But in Arena, like with the randomness and the draft, it's just like, okay, it's a little bonus and it takes a little bit of thought. So
yeah. And there's a card later that synergizes really well with this card, if you're talking about constructed. But these are not constructed cards. Anyway, next neutral card is Timeline Witness. Timeline Witness is again, not legendary, regular neutral card. It's a 3-mana 2/4. Instead of drawing your normal card each turn, discover a card from your deck. So you change all card draws into essentially tracking. It's fine. It's not terribly great because it's a 3-mana 2/4 that has no tempo effect. So that's not going to get you very far on curve, and later on in the game the 2/4 body doesn't really do all that much. Like you would kind of rather just have a tracking. It also does nothing if it dies before you get your turn back, see, because you have to do the normal draw. So its effect is definitely good when it hits, but it's not game winning or anything. Like definitely another, just like the Possibility Seeker, it's not a crazy card. We ended up at a 95 with this card, which is actually where Yeti is. Yeti's not really 100. It's like actually a 95. So this is kind of a Yeti.
Yeah, look, does this thing have the potential to kind of win you the game? Yeah, it does, right? Like it's one of those things in which if you let the effect persist for a long time, then it's quite a powerful effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's understated, and it's one of those things in which if you average out the times in which it doesn't give you any effect, right? It just dies because all it is a 2/4 body. It doesn't have stealth. It doesn't protect itself in any way. Then yeah, like you're missing some stats from it. It's quite underpowered, but this is a cool design at the very least, right?
Yeah.
This is something that we want to see, and we're going to see more effects like this, in which like you get to manipulate your deck, you get to manipulate your draws a little bit more.
All right. Next card is Wildlands Adventure. Can you pull up what these Hall of Fame cards are? Because this will be important. The Hall of Fame is coming back with this card. It's a 5-mana 5/5, so it's already okay. And you draw a card. Like, you get a free card from it. So it's a card draw where you barely lose any stats on curve. And the card you get is a random Hall of Fame card. Now, the Hall of Fame, if you remember, that's the cards that every time there's a rotation, some cards get put into the Hall of Fame because they've been too good or they limited design space or something. So some of these cards are really, 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 really good. Like, for example, Ragnaros, Sylvanas. Others of these cards are just like really high synergy cards that we don't really care about. Like that Murloc that draws both sides 2 cards. Or, God, what's the worst one? There's some really bad ones in here.
Ice Lance is not great.
Oh, Ice Lance is not a good card. No, you can get an Ice Lance.
Conceal, right? But
that's
so
an
anyways,
okay card.
Right. Let's go through the Hall of Fame cards, right? The 2 heavy hitter cards that you mentioned are Rag and Sylvanas, right? Those are game-winning, hugely valuable legendary cards that you can get. But you could also get Conceal. You can get Ice Lance. You can get Power Overwhelming, which is great tempo, right? Overall, a very good card, depending on what your game plan is. Azure Drake, more than solid, right?
Yep.
Quite good. Cold Light Oracle, you mentioned, it's the 3-mana 2/2 that, yeah, that's not great. Captain's Parrot.
Yes. Oh, what a good card. The 1-mana 1/1 bird that draws you a captain.
Yeah.
And by captain, I mean pirate. Now, by pirate, I mean probably not something you have in your deck anymore.
Ice Block, Molten Giant.
Oh, what a good card.
Yeah. And then we have, let's see.
Oh, sorry, Captain's Parrot's 2 mana. I forgot the power creep.
Yeah,
because 1 mana 1/1s now draw you cards. Before it took 2 mana 1/1 to draw you a card.
And then this list still has Elite Tauren Chieftain, Gelbin Mechatork, and Old Murkai, but you can't get those, right?
No, you do. They're part of the Hall of Fame. Okay. I think you can get them. I think they're fair game. And they're not like terribly powerful either. They're kind of normalish cards.
Yeah, those are fine.
So, but in the end, there's I think 12 Hall of Fame cards, and 2 of them are ridiculous. And like,
there's 14 here by my
okay, there's 14. 2 of them are ridiculous. Sylvanas and Rag, and then a bunch of them are normal, and then a couple of them are really bad. So,
yeah, your
ratio here is pretty favorable, I think, overall. But at the same time, your odds of like completely missing your value is also higher than a normal card draw. So this is one of those cards where it's good enough that you want it. I don't care how good of a player you are. Like you can't ditch this RNG. Like it's a 5-mana 5/5 that draws you a card. You're sticking this in your deck, and a lot of games will be won and lost by what random card comes out of it.
Yay!
Fun.
Yeah, this is the thing that I don't like implementing, right? So if you look at card design, what Blizzard has done recently, especially recently, is so they will take a card and say like, okay, there's such a thing as the average power level of a card, right? And then there's sort of the standard deviation, right? In terms of like the floor of the
variance.
So, right. So there is such a thing as like, let's say Bloodfin Raptor has like no sort of deviation, right? It is what it is. there's no randomness to it, like Yeti, right? Yeti, Bloodfin Raptor, those. So like, let's say they are 50 from 0 to 100, but you can also have, you know, a card that is 50. So on average, it's like the same value, but the deviation.
4 mana, flip a coin, win the game or lose the game.
Right. Yeah, that's the perfect example.
0 to 100. That's like the highest amount of variance, right? You either win or lose the game on that spot.
Right. And then when they've created stuff like Bone Drake, right, in which you can get, you know, a Fairy Dragon, or you can get Deathwing / Primordial Drake, and now they've created this card, Timeway Wanderer, in which you can either get, you know, Ice Lance, or you can get Ragnaros. It's, you know, the average power level. I'm not saying that is like insane, but the variance is just too high, right? And you have no idea
even
what
higher variance, than normal. And it's a 5 mana 5/5. At least with Bone Drake, you're taking a step back in tempo. Like you're paying for it in some way. This, you don't really even pay for it. Anyway, it's bad variance. I consider this a crazy card for that reason. Even though it's not necessarily the greatest card, it's going to come out at a 120 in Druid. We keep saying Druid because it's like a very normal class. But it's a 120. It's going to be like a 120 in Mage too. It's not that great, but it's going to be 20% above a Yeti, right? Like a little more than 20% value-wise above a Yeti, which is about what you would expect from it, right? It doesn't exactly come out on curve. It's not a 5/6. But you do get this card. It's really the variance that makes it a crazy card. And this is a neutral card. You're going to see it a lot in the arena. And unless they've over-bucketed it, which is really hard to do at a 120 tier list score in our new tier list, it's just going to see it a lot, and it's going to decide games, a lot of games, especially with an offering bonus, right? Like, these are the worst cards. The worst cards are your neutral cards with an offering bonus that rely very heavily on RNG, uncontrollable RNG.
Yep.
Okay. Next up is Chromie. Continuing on our neutrals. This one's thankfully a legendary. I feel a lot better about this card now that it's a legendary. It's a 4 mana 4/4 Battlecry. Shuffle 4 historical epochs into your deck.
I'm pretty sure epoch is how you pronounce it.
Is it epoch? I pronounce it epoch. There's some meme going around with streamers trying to pronounce this word. I've always pronounced it epoch.
Any history, it's epoch.
Right? Like, I learned history. I learned about like dinosaurs and like people hunting mammoths. They're epochs.
Excellent. Fantastic.
But yeah, and what are epochs, Merps?
I'm trying to find. I clicked out of it, and now I can't find them.
Now you can't find the epochs anymore. Okay,
I can't find the epochs anymore.
This card will remind you a lot of Faldori Strider, which tells you how good it is, because Faldori Strider is insane. Faldori Strider is the rogue card that puts out the 4/4 rogue card that puts 3 4/4s in your deck that just like kind of pop out if you draw them, and you draw another card to replace it. So it's like free 4/4s on your board. These don't give you free 4/4s. One of them gives you like 2 cards. Another one gives you a random consecration on the board. Another one like does something else, and then I think there's one more that draws you 2 different types of cards. Like one draws you like 2 spells from the opponent's class, and one draws you like, I don't know, 2 legendaries. Or they find ways to make it interesting. But overall, you get 4 of these in your deck, not 3 from Faldori Strider, and each of their values is a little bit higher than a regular 4/4 on the board.
Yeah, so I have them all now.
Okay.
So yeah, they are all 4 mana spells, right? So the first one is Battle for Mount Hydra. You know what? I'm just not going to say any of these names. These names are hard.
These names don't
I'm just
matter.
Gonna say the effect. That's safe. So they're all 4 mana spells. The first one is give your minions +2/+2. Draw a card, cast this when drawn.
Okay, so they all say draw a card, cast this when drawn. It's a fancy way of saying this is the Faldori Strider effect. This effect, when you draw it, it happens on the board, and then you get another card to replace it.
Yep. So the first card is give your minions +2/+2. The second card is deal 2 damage to all enemies, face included.
Keep in mind, getting +2/+2 to everything on your board is not terribly great because it's at the very beginning of your turn. It's only great if you happen to like cast something that draws a card, right? If you draw it at the beginning of your turn, your board is going to look pretty crappy.
Yeah. And then the third one is add 2 random spells to your hand. That's just 2 random spells, period. It's not limited to anything. And the fourth one is add 2 random legendary minions to your hand.
Yeah. Okay. So these effects, I think, because of their weird nature of like when you can play them, are actually, I take that back. They're probably worth less than a 4/4. I'd rather get a 4/4 than one of these effects. These effects are maybe like worth like 3 mana, not really 4, maybe even less than 3 mana, depending on the effect. But yeah, either way, they're still good when you get the effect, and they're kind of free because you just shuffle them in your deck and you kind of forget about it.
Right, and you have 4 of these, so
yeah,
yeah.
So there's a lot to it, and so overall, right, it's like about a Feldori Strider. I think we give it a 150.
Yeah, it's Lich King-esque.
Yep.
Which is good in terms of, okay, look, guys, how many minutes are we in? How many cards are we in? And we've mentioned Lich King-esque or close to Lich King.
Well, or Muzzle's on better than Lich King.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so Chromie is like Lich King-esque. It's pretty much Lich King's value. I think Lich King ends up a little bit above this, but it doesn't matter.
Sure.
It's like it's at that level. And of course, it's all RNG, as usual, right? Fitting the theme. Like, huge RNG, too. Whenever you draw these cards, not just the Chromie, but all the cards Chromie puts into your deck, and whether the effects happen to trigger, like, the right ones, or in the 2 cases of drawing, like, random cards, whether the random cards you get are worth anything, like, that all determines whether you win the game or not. Very, very heavily. So it's another one of these like crazy cards, right? Like very crazy, and that's usually what we mean by crazy, right? The variance part. So overall, It is a very, very insanely good card, but it's not like breaking the barriers of what we've known to exist as a Hearthstone card. What it does do is create even more variance than other cards do, than even like, let's say, Lich King.
Yep.
Okay. Next, we have an interesting card. Stasis Dragon.
Stasis Dragon is a 6 mana 10/10 dragon that starts dormant. So, it starts off like in an egg, right? You can't interact with it. Your opponent can't do anything to it. And this awakens with Rush after 2 turns. Now, here's the way I understand it. Okay, so you play this, you spend your 6 mana, and it's just, like an egg, right?
Yep.
You can't do anything with it that turn. It goes to your opponent. They can't do anything with it. It comes back to you. It's still in its egg form. Goes back to your opponent, comes back to you. And as soon as it comes back to you, that time, it pops out as a 10/10 with Rush.
So think about it as just having all of its tempo delayed for 1 more turn than you're used to it being delayed. And then even when you get it back, it does. Even when you get to it, you can't attack face for that 1 turn.
Yeah, so I think a good card to kind of compare it to is Frozen Crusher, right?
Frozen Crusher also 6 mana, but that's an 8/8, and you get to attack with it immediately, but then it gets frozen, and then it gets frozen each more turn it attacks.
Right. So this card, when I initially looked at it, I was like, man, I really do not like this, right? Like, I want to be able to attack, right? I want to be able to attack. I want to be able to do stuff with it, but you can't deny the 10/10 though, right? Like,
it's a 10/10. It's hard to remove. You know what doesn't kill it? Fireball. You know what doesn't kill it? Crushing Hand. Like, you actually need to hard remove it, or you need to throw 10 mana's worth of stuff, like 10 damage worth of stuff into it, and all that stuff will die. And in the meantime, when you're doing that, like, you can't even like keep your board clean, because this 10/10 is not targetable until you get to use it first. Like, all this is very, very important. You're basically not allowed to play a big minion when this is after you play it. And another important thing is that, especially if you have like a 7 mana minion that you want to play, this effectively stealths itself, right? For like the first turn. So it sets up board clears, it sets up you to put a really giant minion in, and your opponent spreads on the board. It sets up weird stuff like spreading plague, like it sets up plenty of stuff. And it's all very valuable. We have it at a 120 right now, in Druid.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay. Next one. All right. So the next neutral card is Infinite Murloc, which everyone is going to request this to draft. Infinite Murloc is a 1 mana.
By the way, is it weird that until you just said that out loud, I have been calling both this and the Wolf Infinity? I realize now that Infinity has a Y and not an E to end that word. But that was really not something I could pick up on before this.
Well, I'm glad, hopefully you guys learned something, because Adwictisher is learning a lot from this podcast.
And also I would like to say that I think Infinity Murloc would be a way cooler name.
Yeah, right? Okay, great. So Infinite Murloc, 1 mana, 1/1 Murloc, Battle Cry, shuffle an Infinite Murloc into your deck. Your future Infinite Murlocs get +1/+1. So
that's Infinite Murlocs everywhere.
Everywhere. So if
in your
you
hand,
draft 5
in
of
your
these,
deck.
Yeah. So if you draft like 5 of these, not only are you shuffling one in as soon as you play it, you buff all of your other Infinite Murlocs, right?
So the trick is to get Infinite Murlocs.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure a deck with 30 Infinite Murlocs would be pretty good.
Mm-hmm. So that's really what this hinges on. It's whether you get your actually, you draft a ton of these or not. The offering bonus is plus 100% or roughly plus 100%, which is pretty good. It means you're gonna on average have one of these per deck if you just draft totally randomly, which means if you want to focus your drafting, you can get 3 of these per deck on average, which means if you start down this road really early on, you can maybe get 4 or 5 of these on average. This is not true. You can only get if you get offered Infinite Murloc as your very first pick, you're gonna average something like 3 in your deck. Not 3, 4. You're gonna average 4 of these in your deck. So it's a strategy, right? If you have 4 Infinite Murlocs in your deck, that's a thing. You have all of your 1-drops, and then they get better. And you keep getting these in your deck, and you have 4 cards that are on constant rotation of being very high tempo cards. So it is a valid strategy. The problem is if you don't hit that, and of course this whole drafting scenario assumes that they bucketed Infinite Murlocs into a bucket that is not penalized, so not in the last 2 buckets. And that's kind of where the problem is, right? Because if it's bucketed in, let's say, the last bucket, which is really where this card belongs, it's not a good card, then it gets a 50% or more penalty. We still don't know what it is. Blizzard hasn't told anybody, even in their big reveal. Well, then you're not looking at 4, you're looking at 2, and then the card gets a lot worse. On the other hand, if it's bucketed in one of the buckets that doesn't get reduced, let's say the third from the last bucket where it's not reduced, well, then you're facing against a lot better cards.
Right. Then you're actually facing against good cards.
Yeah, then even if you had 4 or 5 Infinite Murlocs in your deck, so you really got to make that commitment. So overall, it's not a very good card.
Yeah. So this has got the meme potential, and you might get beat by a guy with 6 Infinite Murloc decks, right? Because after your third one, each subsequent Infinite Murloc that you draft is insane value, right? Absolutely insane value. But on average, look, you are paying a lot initially to start up the to start the train, right?
And if you fail, by the way, you don't just have a 1-mana 1/1. You have a really crappy 1-mana 1/1 that then puts a 1-mana 2/2 into your deck for you to draw later on when you need a top deck.
Right.
And it's not good.
We've seen 1-mana 2/2s be good, but that's because they're initially 1-mana 2/2. So you can get it on turn 1 to play it as a 1-mana 2/2. Shuffling a 1-mana 2/2 into your deck after your turn 1 is way worse than initially drafting a 1-mana.
It's worse than not having an ability.
Yeah. So you pay the cost for this, and that's why this is one of the only cards in which it's actually not good.
Yeah,
right?
It's bad.
Yeah.
Don't pick it. Timeway Wanderer. This is my least favorite card of the entire set. And that's saying something, because this entire set is just filled with RNG and crap. But this card, in particular, draws my ire. And it is Timeway Wanderer. It is 5 mana, 6/3, Battle Cry. Discover a spell, reduce its cost by 5, and then put it on the top of your deck. So it's not just discover a spell. We had this card basically for Ethereal Conjurer for Mage, in which it's 5 mana, 6/3, discover a spell, and then you put it in your hand. So you draw the card. Rather than doing that, rather than gaining that card advantage of the spell, you are instead replacing your next card, which is a normal card in your deck. So it's a pretty valuable card compared to these random cards you can discover. Or like the discover effect basically gets dampened down because you're discovering a random card, not a card from your deck. And you're replacing a card from your deck with this. But it costs 5 mana less. So, depending on whether those 3 offering choices give you something worthwhile to take that is high enough mana, you're probably going to get a spell that you can play for free. Because not a lot of spells are more than 5 mana. And depending on which card you can get out of it, this card is either going to be okay. Let's say you get a 2 mana card, or like a 3 mana card would make this a very good card. A 2 mana card would make this like kind of an okay card. And a 4 mana card would make this a like insanely good card. And a 5 mana card or more would make this a brokenly OP card, like on the level of Ultimate Infestation. One of the biggest problems that this game has is being able to tempo stuff out. You are not allowed to cheat tempo. I mean, you are, but when you cheat tempo, it's really good. That's why they had to nerf things like Innervate, right? Like, that was a standard part of the game. It was the whole Druid thing. 0 mana, 1 card is worth 2 mana. That's what you get for losing a card. 2 mana. So here, you were supposed to basically draw a card, and instead, you're getting 2 mana. That's already problematic. Like, starting right there. That's already, like, a really good card. But instead of getting 2 mana, you get up to 5 mana, and it's just delayed a turn. That's a terrible, terribly broken swing that the people who designed the Hearthstone game know. That's why this card is not a possible card for Constructed. Like, even though it's entirely random, right? You're discovering a spell. It doesn't even matter what you're putting in your deck or like whatever with it. It's just such a silly, brokenly overpowered card. And rather than say, oh, it's a silly, brokenly overpowered card, let's give it to one class in the arena, they made it a neutral. So it's going to show up everywhere. And depending on what RNG you get from this card, because everyone's going to draft it. I don't care if it's in the very top bucket. Unless it's matching up against like a meteor or whatever, you're taking it. You're going to win or lose games based on it. And what your opponent does with it.
Yeah, so this card, it's still a little bit hard for me to really nail. Like, I feel very confident in some of the other scores. For just me, I'm just like, I don't know, because it's hard for me to think of all the possibilities, right? Because it's just discover a spell, and I can't really grasp that, for all classes and then all the situations, because the first card that people think of is just Ethereal Conjurer, just because of the stat line, right? Mm-hmm. The initial cost and then the stat line is exactly the same. But after the point which you play, it's so different, right? You just discover a spell, but then you replace your draw with it, and then you essentially exchange card for the tempo. You exchange a card for the tempo, but then there's sort of this calculus you have to do because you want to get the most value out of this, right? So you can't really,
you're getting the most value out of this by picking the largest card anyway.
Yeah.
So, like, you just can't pick a crappy card. That's the problem, right? Like, if you're in a losing position, you don't want to pick up Bloodlust, even though it's 5 mana. And this card's gonna be crappy for Shaman in general. But not crappy, but just like worse than for other classes, like not a premium card. But for most of the places, you're actually incentivized to just take the best card, which is usually the largest card, which is usually the card that will save you the most mana. Like, it all kind of coalesces in the same way. So the problem with this card is that it is very heavy on RNG. Very heavy on RNG. So the variance is very, very high. And so on the tier list, it's not going to be like that high. And by it's not going to be that high, I mean it's going to be better than a Lich King. But it's not going to be brokenly high. Why? Because we penalize RNG a lot on our tier list. Because for good players, you don't want to rely on this card. This is an unreliable card. But you will lose to this card a lot. Because it's a very good card. It's a very good card, and your opponents will take it, and you'll take it, and you will get screwed, and your opponents will not get screwed a larger percent of times than if you were both playing Yetis. A much larger percentage of times.
Yep. Yeah. Look, this is another thing in which, even if you agree, or like, no matter how much you agree with the score that we end up with, I think most people will agree that it's like, why introduce this, right? Like, what is
fun?
That's the thing. And look, if you say fun and your definition of fun is just like wacky, crazy, anything can happen, then yeah, I guess. But I don't think I don't know. At least for the people that probably listen to this podcast and the people that play a lot of Arena, it's just like, it doesn't matter how good this card is to see that the design is just not healthy, right? Like
it's a very, very stupid design, and the point is that someone over at Blizzard thought of something like this, and everyone's like, "Ah, it's really cool," and then they're like, "Wow, we obviously can't put it in Constructed or anything like it in Constructed because that would ruin the entire game." And then the rest of the team is like, okay, well, I guess there's this arena event. This seems like a pretty cool thing you can do there and not mess everything up. And so it came there. And there's going to be a lot of people who look at this card and say it is fun. I don't doubt that. But I think it's not going to, like, depending on how often you see it in the arena, it's not going to be healthy for the arena.
Yeah. Okay. So after this, we have Time-Bound Giant, right? Time-Bound Giant, 15 mana, 8/8. Costs 1 less for each card you've drawn. So we've seen the problems with some of the other giants in Constructed. You don't really see it in the arena. You almost never do. In which they can cheat out giants very quickly. The best example is a Mountain Giant. Right, we've seen it in Constructed, turn 4 Mountain Giant. That's kind of since the old days of Handlock. That's been a common theme. With Time-Bound Giant, Blizzard has really sort of nipped that in the bud. They're like, this is probably just not going to happen. Essentially, what you can do is you can play a turn 7, 8/8, right? I believe that's correct. You're able to play like a turn 7 8/8 essentially, but you're probably not, unless something absolutely crazy happens, you're probably not playing it earlier than that. But then afterwards, so you can play like a turn 7 8/8, or if you wait until turn 10, it's probably like a 5 mana 8/8 or a 4 mana 8/8, and if you go significantly past that, then you can really tempo out like a 2 mana 8/8, right? It'll be like a Sea Giant, except you couldn't play it on like turn 7 when there was a full 4. So initially when I looked at this card, I was like, no, this sucks. And then I thought about, I'm like, okay, you can't cheat it out in the way that you can with some of those other giants, but realistically, how often are you doing it, right? And there is still value in tempoing stuff out in the late game. So
yeah. And it's not even the late game. You're going to have it in your hand in, like, we'll call it the mid-late game, like, let's say turn 12.
Yeah.
Right? Like, turn 12 happens. You need tempo on turn 12. You're not, like, sitting there top-decking yet on turn 12 for most of your decks. Especially not a deck that you get this card in. Because if you get this card in the deck, you want to have more card draws, right? Like, from your deck. Because it literally synergizes with this card. So it matters, and it's gonna end up being a 120 on our tier list, at least for Druid.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's like better than Yeti, but lower than the a lot of the super premiums.
Yeah, it's actually gonna be a little bit lower than that, higher than that. But yeah. It's good. If you think about what's going to happen, like imagine you're playing the game and you are evaluating what's happening, and it's turn 10 or turn 12 or whatever, and then all of a sudden your opponent cheats out 5 mana. This is always the problem, right? Like all of a sudden your opponent cheats out X tempo, and that X is greater than 2. That's a problem. That's always a problem. Why? Because that single event wipes away all the advantage you have on the board. Whereas if that single event happens to you and you have the board, you are now overextended on the board and you will get destroyed by a board clear or MCT. So yeah, it's always, every single time that we say a card is overvalued, there are some times where it's because it's a ridiculous amount of card advantage. See UI or Pyros or whatever. Lich King. But for the most part, the super, 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 super good cards are the tempo cheaters or the tempo swingers, even if it takes like a very specific scenario for the tempo to be cheated out, right? Like say MCT, you gotta play 4 cards, or like a Dragon Slayer, you gotta have a dragon, right? Like it's not like the cards themselves are the best cards ever. It's that variance is way too large. And Timebound Giant is no different. It has a very limited set. It's not even very limited. It has a pretty limited set of when it becomes overpowered. But in the times in which it becomes overpowered, it will win you the game, having very little to do with how good you played the game before that.
Yeah. So I think this is a card in which it's good, and it's I like it, right? Like this is one of the safer cards that they printed for this event, right? Yeah. Yes, you can cheat mana, but there's definitely a cost to it, right? Just like a lot of big cards you can't play early, and the longer the game goes on, the better it is. But, we've established this before. An OP card on turn 15 is fine because, it's turn 15, right? You've given your opponent sort of a fair chance to also play their crazy stuff. And at that point, it's sort of... it's definitely a lot more fair. So that's fine. And these are the neutral cards that we have highlighted. And in the 9 neutral cards, how many of these are just bonkers ridiculous? I think we have like 3 super ridiculous cards and about like 3 just premium cards, right?
They all have offering bonuses.
Yeah.
They're all seen in every class.
Yeah, really good. Really, really good. And the only... Basically, Infinite Murloc is your only, like, bad one. And Timeline Witness is your only, like... Well, it's just meh. It's okay, right?
Yeah, that's the only other one below 100.
Yeah, and the other ones range from, like, pretty good, which is Possibility Seeker, you know? It's, like, better than Yeti-ish, to just absolutely broken levels like Morazond.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Woohoo. Good stuff. And if not like, just broken like Morazon, then high variance like Time.
Timeway Wanderer. And I want to clarify, like think about how Timeway Wanderer works, right? You're losing 1 mana and you're gaining 5 the next turn. So you're gaining a net of 4 tempo, 1 turn delayed. Usually a 1 turn delay. We have formulas for each turn, and then how tempo works is like this very sophisticated thing. But we'll say you get about 3 extra tempo if you can hit a 5 mana card, and you get 2 tempo if you can hit a 4 mana card. And a 6/3 is like a pretty normal sized body. So in terms of card advantage, it's a normal card advantage card. It also gives you a way to bank tempo, which is very important too. And it's a way, to be fair, there's not a lot of other ways to bank tempo. So this is good design space in that sense. The RNG part of it, especially with their obsession over this discover mechanic, is really the problematic part. So you get 2 extra tempo out later. And 3 extra tempo out. A little more than 3 extra tempo too, if you can get a 5 mana card or above. Like, the RNG aspect of it will make it so that, like, me personally, I would never take a Time Wanderer over a Lich King. But I think for most people, it's in that zone. Like, for an average player, it's going to be in that zone of how good this card is. Just for gaining like essentially a free innervate on a regular like size body.
Yeah.
Just imagine if you had a card that was like 4 mana, 4/4, gain 3 mana, or like gain 2 mana, not even 3 mana, right? Like gain 2 coins in your hand, but you can't use them until the next turn. You take that. That's an insane card. That's not like a good card. That's a flat out insane card.
Yeah.
But of course, this is not what this card says. This card is RNG. So good players will not want to draft it as high as bad players, but I get the feeling that it's not bucketed high enough that it's going to be worth it for all players to draft. Okay, let's go to class cards. We're about an hour in on this podcast, just starting the class cards, just starting the next 18 cards. Let's go fast on this. Some of these class cards are not very interesting. This is really like a set about the neutral cards. The class cards add a little bit of flavor, and remember, class cards appear twice as often as neutral cards.
Yep.
So
sounds good.
Right. Okay. First one is Flash Forward. That is the Druid card. It's 3 mana. It says each player gains 2 mana crystals and draws 2 cards. It is crap.
Yep, it's bad.
Just crap.
In order to justify it, you have to have a tight game plan, and that's really hard to do in the arena. So it's just really, really, really bad.
Like,
moving on.
I mean, okay, it's not like that terrible. Let me rephrase this, okay? Okay. So you're spending 3 mana, right? You get 2 mana crystals back. They're full mana crystals. So this only costs you 1 mana. Now, in exchange for this 1 mana, you both ramped effectively, right?
Right.
Like, so it's not like you're ramping your opponent and not ramping yourself or anything, and you both draw 2 cards, but you get to use the cards immediately. So you're basically paying 1 mana to use these 2 cards before your opponents.
Mm-hmm.
It's just definitely not worth it, but it's not like the most terrible card ever made, right?
Yep. Okay.
Harbinger of Catastrophe.
Harbinger of Catastrophe. This is a Druid card, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Druid card. 6 mana, 6/7 dragon. So standard stats, right? Mm-hmm. Very standard stats.
Bodorfist Ogre.
Bodorfist Ogre stats, dragon tag. Not bad. At the start of your turn, so when it comes back to you, summon the highest cost minion from each player's deck. So you drop it, you end your turn, it doesn't do anything. Your opponent, does stuff, drops stuff, attacks. And then once it comes back to you, then suddenly both of your highest cost minions come forth from the deck with Summoning Sickness, right? But you don't get to attack with it.
Nope.
So you get the initiative that turn in terms of you get to see what gets pulled out on both sides, and you have that initiative, but they get to actually attack first with their thing that comes out because you have Summoning Sickness. Look, this is one of those things in which you can kind of try to build towards it, but even if you can, it's like, do you really want to draft the 2 Ultra Swords, right?
Nope.
Like, you end up with 2 Ultra Swords. That's the problem, right?
It's a bad card. It's not a terrible card. It's still a 6 mana, 6/7 body.
Yeah.
So it's like definitely draftable, but like don't think of it as a Bodorfist Ogre, and its ability is definitely a negative and not a positive.
Yeah. Overall, we treat it as a negative, and I think
it's going to come out at an 80.
Yeah.
Whereas Yeti, we said before, was like a 95 or something. So it's significantly below a Yeti. Bodorfist Ogre is probably like a 90 or something like that. So it's a downgrade.
Okay, so we are going to Hunter next, my favorite class, right? And then the card that I think everyone...
So before we get to Hunter, let's just get this, just so we're clear. We're doing this by classes, right? And we're doing this by classes by alphabetical order. So we start with Druid. And Druids have 2 pretty bad cards for this set, right? Like normally if Druid got a Harbinger of Catastrophe, it would be like, okay, whatever. But in the context of this set, that's a pretty crappy card. So Druids are not what you want to play. Do not play Druid. There's no point. There's one card that is like literally, I think, the worst card in this entire set. And the other card is 1, not terribly exciting, and 2, also not good. So don't play Druid. Okay, now on to Hunter.
Okay, Hunter's First card is Infinite Wolf. Not Infinity Wolf, by the way. Infinite Wolf.
Infinity Wolf.
4 mana, 5/5 beast with Rush. And if we ended there, we'd be like, oh my god, right? 4 mana, 5/5 beast with Rush. After this attacks, shuffle it into your deck and give future Infinite Wolves +2/+2. That's all Infinite Wolves in your deck. So
including in your hand, not just in your deck.
Yeah. In your hand, and it's all of your future Infinite Wolves. So the one that gets shuffled back, and the other ones that you've drafted, if you drafted other ones. But
so let's break down this card and what it actually does. It needs to live. If it does not live, if you're just using it as a 4 mana deal 5 damage, fine, but it's not getting shuffled anywhere. It's gone.
Yep.
So
and what this does is so this will not stick on the board after you attack with it.
Yes, even if it survives.
Yep. It either dies, or if it survives, it just goes back into your deck, right? Not saying it's bad. This is the thing that prevents it from being the most OP thing ever created, right?
It's not better than a Lich King. It's good. This is one of our crazy cards. It's definitely in the crazy bucket, first of all, because it's 4 mana 5 damage, and then it has positive effects potentially.
Yep.
Like if you ever have a card that deals more damage than its mana cost, and then it has a positive effect on top of that, it's going to be kind of a crazy card. It's not too RNG. It's actually one of like the more okay cards that exist. But one of the things that is going to happen to Infinite Wolf, like compare this with the other 4 mana 5/5 Rush card, Militia Commander in Warrior. The 5/5 there turns into a 2 plus whatever mana cost remaining. So it actually stays on the board and gets you more tempo if you're using it for its normal purposes. But so like in some ways the card that it's already existing is actually better. But the way that it's not better is one, when you get your next card back, if this card does go away. So compare the two, right? Militia Commander drops you, let's say you're using the ability. You're not just using it as a 4 mana deal 5 damage. You're actually using the ability. It survives. Militia Commander will give you, let's say, a 2/2 on the board. Infinite Wolf will put it back into your deck. So when you draw the Infinite Wolf again, you will then get that 2 extra tempo that you have lost before back. So you need to get another Infinite Wolf, which again is an insane card to begin with. So you get a good card too, but you're getting the tempo that you would have lost from Militia Commander back. So the math adds up that you kind of recover your tempo loss whenever you actually draw the Infinite Wolf, or if you just have another Infinite Wolf in your hand. And not until that point is Infinite Wolf better than a Militia Commander. Now, a Militia Commander is like, I think, top bucket or like second bucket. Anyway, our tier list rates it like over a 130 or like around a 130. So it's already very good. But it's very important to note that in most cases, you use Infinite Wolf as like a solo card, even if you're shuffling it back into your deck. It's not going to be better than a Militia Commander. It's actually going to be worse. Now, the difference, and one key difference, is that Infinite Wolf can be played on the board and left there, and it will still be a 5/5, and then it can attack face the next turn. So this is especially important if you get like a really big Infinite Wolf. Like, let's say it gets upgraded 3 times, and now you have 11/11. Maybe you don't want to attack a minion. Maybe you just want to leave it there and hit face the next turn. You can do that. Or just as a 4-drop, right? If you don't have a target, Militia Commander is actually a 2/5. This is still a 5/5. You're just waiting for whenever you can find a target. So that's very important. And then it gets a lot of extra value for the fact that you can have a lot of Infinite Wolves in your deck. Remember, this is a class card with a plus 100% bonus. What that means is we were talking about how many Murlocs you can get, and I think we settled on if this is one of your earlier picks, you can get like 4 or something. Otherwise, you can get like 3. Well, with Infinite Wolves, you can go higher. It's a class card. You'll see it more. You can get 5 or 6 if you just start picking off. If you like start off with one of these cards in your first 3 picks, you're gonna average like 6 of these in a deck. And these aren't going to be in the lowest bucket with any penalties. This is going to be a very high bucket card. So you may have to have a very not diverse deck. you may have to avoid all other 4-drops in order to like have an actual functional deck. But you're getting a lot of very insane value with this card.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, you can. It's a card that a lot of people will treat as a removal because it's going to be a really good removal, and then it can double up as a normal minion, right? Where you just don't rush, and then it's heavily overstated, but with a drawback, right? With like with a drawback in which the next time you attack, it will be gone. Like it'll either die or it'll just go back into your deck. But once again, very good. It's not the craziest card that I've seen some people categorize it as, because I think the first time I saw it, I was also just like, what? But that was because I didn't read it carefully, right? And then once you look at it, you're like, okay, it is a crazy card, and it is very good, but it's not like Lich King good. It's still slightly like below.
Yeah, it's a little bit below Lich King on our tier list.
Yeah.
And that's still a really good card.
Oh yeah.
And in terms of like design, this is one of those like designs. It's not terrible like the RNG stuff we were talking about before, but it is still RNG when you draw these like ridiculously over like buff cards. And it is RNG how many of these are in your deck. Like if you draft one of these, or even like just in general, right? It's how many of these you're offered. Because I think it's going to be bucketed in a way that you're going to want to pick these every time. Maybe they get in the way of your secret synergies, but this is going to be a better synergy, I think, than your secret synergies are going to be. You just kind of like take that bucket, whichever bucket the Infinity Wolf is in, and just say, whenever this guy comes up, I just take it, and you'll be fine.
Yep. So look, it's kind of, I think it's very telling in which we always have sort of a baseline for new cards, right? And for many expansions, it was always like, hey, how does this compare to a Yeti, or how does this compare to, a Spider Tank, right? Something like that. And for this arena event, our baseline is Lich King, like in terms of, because that's where a lot of these cards are sort of hovering around. And you certainly have a couple that are, like Infinite Murloc is kind of a dud, and then Timeline Witness is like meh, but we've already seen quite a few cards that are at Lich King level and a few cards that are above Lich King. So that's sort of where we are in terms of these cards. It's like that's insane. That's crazy. Like Lich King is the card of late game value. Like you just win or lose games based on that. And we have already seen so many cards that either beat it or are competitive with it.
And this is not the best card in Hunter that gets introduced. Like, you may think it is, because it's almost as good of a Lich King, but there's going to be a card that's better than a Lich King, and it is also in Hunter, and it's going to make Hunters, like, the best freaking class. It is called a Chrono Shot. 3 mana, sap, it costs 2 more.
Yep.
So, for 1 extra mana than sap, you make the card that you sap your opponents into cost 2 more. Now, is this better than sap? No, but this is freaking Hunter. You don't give Hunter a sap or a naturalize and say, oh, all's fine in the world. This is going to be insane.
Yeah. And look, Freezing Trap was already super good in the arena, right?
Yeah.
And part of it was because, it was an efficient removal, even though an awkward one. It was a very efficient removal in a class that doesn't have the strong, other than Deadly Shot, right? Had a little bit of difficulty in removing stuff. And in Hunter, whenever you increase the cost of something, it might as well just be dead. Because if you're putting the pressure on, and then, you Freezing Trap or you Chrono Shot something back into their hand, and they have to pay 2 more than what they initially paid in order to play it, unless it's a super taunt, unless it is amazingly tempo efficient, unless it gives so much heal, they can't really play it again because you've already tempoed out heavily with Chrono Shot, and they can't do it unless they have the follow-ups upon follow-ups upon follow-ups. So this is insane. I like it as a Hunter player, but as for sort of class identity, as for just sort of how healthy this card is, I don't I don't know. It's something that I don't think hunters just should have, right? It's something that I think they should sort of struggle through, and we've seen that whenever
Deadly
you give
shots and stuff, right? Because the point of deadly shot is that its
right,
drawback seems pretty innocuous. With all its random, I guess it's not as good as an assassinate, but that's why it costs less mana. But the way to control the randomness is to trade. Hunters don't like to trade, and then you see how it kind of comes together with hunters having to make decisions. You don't make decisions with Chrono Shot.
yeah. So Chrono Shot better than Lich King easily,
Easily.
like easily. This is for hunters. Look, for a lot of classes as well, this would be premium. For hunters, is like super duper duper premium. Cool. All right. So look, we talked about those two cards. Just like how druids got bad cards, hunters got really, like, on the flip side, hunters got really, really good cards, right?
Yep.
It makes sense. Druids are currently doing very well. Hunters are not doing well. So why not, help them, like, help the class that's not doing well, and then sort of bring down the class that's doing well. And they, you can also tell they don't want to push like aggro hunter. They want to push control, right? And they gave him two of like the best control tools. And it's not like Infinite Wolf is just a purely control tool. What it does is it forces you to kind of like slow down and control. And at the very end, once you have that 4 mana 11/11, like you said, then you can wait another turn and then hit face with it, right?
Depends on how many Infinite Wolves you have.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, if you just have one Infinite Wolf, like I said, it's just not a terribly great card. Like, the score we give it is not based on you have only one Infinite Wolf in your deck. It's you have the average amount of Infinite Wolves in your deck, which is a lot.
Yep. Okay.
All right, so that's Hunter. Let's look at the next class. What's the next class?
Mage.
Mage. Oh, we didn't even have to go back. Mage has 2 cards, as all of them do. Ooh.
Good job. You recognize this.
And the first one is Consider the Past. 4 mana card. Add 3 random spells from the past to your hand. I think from the past just means wild cards.
Yeah.
And they're not like any better or worse than current ones on average. So It's really just a 4 mana Kabbalah's Tome.
Which is really good.
Yeah, which is good. So it's gonna be it's gonna end up as a 120 on the tier list.
Yeah, it's just gonna be pretty good. I don't think there's too much to say about this.
Yeah,
right?
Like, it's not a crazy card. It's pretty crazy RNG as usual, but it's not like a Chrono Shot or an Infinite Wolf. Like, it's not that levels of crazy.
Yep. Okay. And then the next card is Cavern Dreamer. Which is a 2 mana 1/3 minion. At the end of your turn, add a random spell that costs 2 or less to your hand. So this thing is an engine, right? And you always, it's not like one of those cards in which you take a small risk and because there's a possibility of you getting nothing, right? With this, it's at the end of your turn, so you are guaranteed to get at least 1 draw with it.
Yep.
And if this survives, if you can protect it some way, or if they just can't respond, you are going to get 2 draws out of it.
Yep.
And spells are good because they give you an initiative. Small spells are typically good because they
can always be, you're guaranteed this is a playable card the next turn.
Yeah. And small spells typically have a pretty sizable effect for their cost,
yes.
right?
They all get an extra tempo because at 0 mana you still can play a card.
Yeah. So this card is just really, really freaking good. It's got game-winning potential with low mana cost, and look, it's not the hardest thing to kill, but at the same time, your investment into it is so small, right? There are a lot of cards in which you can win the game, but your investment has to be really huge. With Cavern Dreamer, your investment is really small. So even if it just gets killed on the next turn, you've kind of already replaced it with the card that it's drawn for you. So yeah, really, really freaking good. I think we placed it a little bit below Lich King, but still.
Yeah, it's somewhat below Lich King. It's like it's around where an Assassinate is. It's It's good. Like, think about it in terms of like a Manatite totem, right? Which costs like one more mana, but it kind of does the same thing, and it draws cards from your deck. This adds random spells 2 or less mana. You'd rather have cards from your hand by like some margin than a random spell of 2 or less mana. But Manatite Totem also, one, can't attack at all, although that one attack is probably not the most useful thing in the world. It's still very important, right? Like, at some point, if you need the tempo, you just like use it to deal 1 damage. You also chip away your opponent's face, and also 3 mana is problematic because that's where you have to play your curve cards, whereas at 2 mana these days, right, you don't really need to curve out on 2, so this could just be a bonus and you can start drawing very early on. And the earlier you play something, the less likely it is to be removed when it gets to be these super early turns, because chances are it'll screw up your opponent's curve to play a removal if they even have it. Whereas when you get to later turns, they've had more turns to draw their removals, and they have board clears that can wipe stuff up, right? Like, it gets a little iffy. So Cavern Dreamer has some advantages, but like, Manatite Totem is not a great card these days. It's like an okay card. Cavern Dreamer is a much better card, but it's not like Lich King level of brokenness. So still a crazy card, especially because all the spells you draw are going to be playable the very next turn. But not like power-wise. Overall, on average, there's a lot of really bad spells that cost very little mana.
Yeah, it's true.
So once again,
this is another one of these cards. Oh, were you about to do the recap, or?
Oh no, I was about to just warn people that like the tier list score for this card again reflects the randomness of the card, which means that your opponent will get a lot better use out of it than you. Although this card's a little different because you can probably control the board better and keep it alive longer than your opponent can. So it's a double-edged sword. On the other hand, the quality of spells, right? Like, you wanted more guaranteed than actual random.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so if we look at where Mage is, right, there's, once again, we've talked about sort of the design aspect of it. Like, is this within the identity of Mage? It's like, yeah, lots of spells, right? Mages cast spells. But if you look at Consider the Past, 3 random spells from the past, you're opening up like a huge Pandora's box, right? I have really no idea what is going to happen here.
Yep. No reads.
No reads. It's much wider than what Tome used to be. And with Cavern Dreamer, it's just a random spell that costs 2 or less. I don't know what that is. I have no idea, right? And this is also one of those things in which cheap game-winning engines are always dangerous in any card game, right? If you look at Magic the Gathering, if you look at just sort of any sort of card like that. Now, tempo is always more dangerous than card value in terms of small engines. If you look at the original Undertaker, right? But still, it's stuff in which the design of it, the inability to make the read, the snowball mechanic of it, it's just like, why? It certainly fits the theme of Mage in terms of being a control class. They cast a lot of spells, they're able to respond, but
mages are random. Haven't you played Monster Hunt? It's all about randomness. Man. That's how mages work.
Yeah. So look, Mage's got good cards, right? Like these are 2 fine cards. You're gonna draft them, you're gonna play them, you're gonna like them, but you're not going to know what to expect, whether you're the Mage or you're facing the Mage, and that's kind of it.
It's crazy. Also known as fun.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Paladin. Paladin, 1 mana card. Blessing of Aeons. Too many vowels. They don't belong together.
Okay. Blessing of Aeons, 1 mana, give a minion at the end of your turn, gain +1/+1. So this does basically nothing when you first play it. Like,
it has no initiative, but you get +1/+1. You always get something out of the card.
Right. So can this be good if you protect it? Definitely. Right. Like, definitely. And then if they're not able to respond, it's really good. But overall, it's just low impact, not great.
It's a little below a Yeti is where we put it.
Yeah, it's balanced out by the fact that there will be games in which you can protect it, in which you get 3-4 turns out of it, and it's amazing. But the fact that you have no initiative with it,
and that's big, right? For people who are looking at this and be like, well, Divine Strength just gave 1+1+2, and it seems okay, right? Like, it wasn't a great card, but it was okay. The fact that you get initiative with that extra damage and extra health is so huge. Because if you get initiative, like a normal buff, you get to save a minion, or you get to take out a larger minion, so your opponent doesn't get to use that minion the next turn. So you effectively deny your opponent a possible attack, or you put an extra minion on your board because you've saved your minion. This card can't do that. It's like literally just a value engine. And I know people love value engines, and Twitch chat certainly votes for a lot of these a lot of the times, but they're just not as good as initiative. The way to win the game is still, and has always been, because it's arena. You gotta find ways to get tempo. Either tempo from the beginning, or a way to flip the board and get some tempo. And this is, it's very slow burning. On the other hand, it's 1 mana, and 1 card. It's not the end of the world if this doesn't exactly pan out. And like I said, it will get some value. It will get +1/+1. It's not going to be totally wasted.
No. You're gonna lose to this card. I would say like more than you want to lose to this card. Yep. That doesn't mean it's good. That just means like
it's okay, right? We put it like 5 points below a Yeti. Yeti's okay. You're never sad to get a Yeti in your deck. I'm usually happy to get a Yeti in the deck.
So this isn't a trash card that I've seen some people categorize it, but it's one of those cards in which the net effect is just too small.
Yeah, and it's too slow.
Too slow, yeah. But you will be extremely frustrated at those couple of games in which this beats you.
Yeah.
Just this card alone beats you on turn 1 or turn 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. Next Paladin card is a Bronze Broodmother. Bronze Broodmother is a 5-mana 5/5 dragon. When you draw this, summon a 1/1 wee whelp, which is just a dragon on the board.
It's a 1/1 dragon.
So you don't have to play it to get a 1/1 dragon. So you just randomly get a 1/1 on the board at some point when you draw it. But as soon as you draw it, your opponent knows you have this card. But this card is so not special, your opponent will not care if you have this card or not in your hand. It like literally does not affect their decision making at all in like 99% of cases.
Yep.
Maybe if they had a Dragon Slayer, they can consider holding it an extra turn or two. But there's really going to be so many dragons that Dragon Slayers are going to be ridiculous anyway. Like, they'll have a target for Dragon Slayers.
Yeah. It's pretty close to a Yeti. That's where we kind of put it, right? It's nice that you get a 1/1 sort of for free almost popping up, right? You definitely pay for a little bit because a 5-mana 5/5 is understated. It's slightly understated. And getting that 1/1 out without having to commit to playing this card is nice, but at the same time, it is only a 1/1. And like you said, now they know that you have a card that basically does nothing, right? So.
Yep.
Yep.
So that's Paladin. It gets 2 okay-ish cards, which is a little underwhelming in this meta. Like, we talked about Mage getting good cards, Hunters getting insane cards, Druids getting bad cards. Paladins are Paladins. Like, they're fine. They already had good cards. They're still, like, one of the top classes in the meta before this. And this isn't going to, like, destroy them or anything. These are totally playable and draftable cards. Depends on where they're bucketed. So, assuming they're bucketed in decent places, it'll be fine.
Yep.
They're just, like, not exciting to play, though. I don't know. Like, these are not the cards I want to try out in the, in the arena.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on from Paladin to Priest, I think it is. Yes, to Priest. Reminisce. Reminisce is a 2-mana spell. It says add 2 random cards your opponent played this game to your hand. So it is 1 mana less than your like Thoughtsteal or Arcane Intellect, which makes it sound like it's really good, but it's not.
No.
Because your opponent has to play it in this game, and your opponent is playing a lot of crappy curve minions in the game so far before you play this card.
Right. So look, do you play this on turn 6 knowing that 4 of the cards are like a fairy dragon, a firefly, the other firefly, and just like a a random 3-mana 3/3.
A coin potentially.
A coin potentially, right? So
like,
this is one of those cards, and I watched Shady's review as well, and he, a good point he made is like, look, when you play the Thought Steal, when you play those sort of cards, you're not just looking and saying like, I'm paying the mana and I'm drawing 2 cards. You're looking for that chance to steal their game-winning card, right? And with a card like Reminisce, if you play it at some point before, turn 10, they haven't played their game-winning card.
Well, if they play their game-winning cards, they've won the game.
Then they've won the game. Okay, yeah, like you know what I mean, right? Like you want the heavy-hitting cards, and they don't play that.
And also, all this stuff is a little weaker now, because now all the game-winning cards are RNG, and that means they'll hit the RNG, you won't.
Right. So the cost is fantastic. You look at a 2 mana for 2 cards, yay! But yeah, it's not good.
Yeah,
it's just really not good.
No. It's not bad. It's but just below a Thought Steal and Arcane Intellect will be by a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Ripple in Time is the next card. You wanna talk about it?
Yeah. Ripple in Time, 1 mana spell. Discover a minion. If you play it this turn, it has Echo. So discover the infinite Murloc, essentially. Yeah. Look, we've seen cards with sort of a similar effect, right? We've seen like just cheap discover spells, cheap sort of like cycle cards in terms of like tracking, hallucination, just stuff like those, blazing invocation as well. Discover is good. The ability to find exactly what you need, whether it's a big card, whether it's a card with, initiative, whether it's a taunt, that's really good. And the fact that it has Echo potentially, that's just a nice little bonus, right? It means that small cards that would have been small in the late game now become big.
Are big. Like, how amazing is that? Like, I don't think people give this card enough credit, because it's, you can't just, like, discover a spell and repeatedly cast it until your opponent's face is dead. But every single small card, like a normal card, not a card with Echo, but a normal card, is about 1 tempo undercosted to account for the fact that it's a card. So that's why you have your Raptors are 3/2s, or they should really be 3/3s, but, like if they were, like, a premium card. And you can get that bonus repeatedly. So you will very, very, very quickly get back the mana you spent on Ripple in Time by taking any small card and playing it repeatedly. If you have like issues with board space, you can of course just take a big card normally. One of the things you're always searching for with these fine cards is either 1, answers, which this will not likely do, but it has some % chance of doing, or 2, a really large thing. This guarantees you a really large thing.
Yeah, because even if it's a small thing, it becomes a really large thing.
And not just like a really large thing, like, oh, I got a Boulderfist Ogre, look how large it is. But like a larger thing than a Boulderfist Ogre. Because you can repeatedly play any card. So the actual value on this card is actually pretty high when it comes to doing the thing that you expect to do from it. So it can be like a last-ditch effort to get a rush or a taunt minion or a charge minion. But more often than not, just finding a really big thing and being guaranteed that it is actually a really, really big thing is good.
Yep.
It's gonna.
I see someone in chat just saying it's like, yeah, a priest played this, and then they summoned 7 leper gnomes.
Oh my god, you're dead.
Right? Like it's just one of those things in which because 1-drops are overstated, right? Or like just properly stated. So then on turn 8, they play Ripple in Time, Leper Gnome, which you would never draft for a priest, right? Like never, ever, ever. It's complete trash here. Suddenly you're paying 7 mana for a split 7/7 that deals 14 damage to the face. Pretty good. You would draft that. Or, like you do Ripple in Time, Crystalline Oracle, right? Suddenly,
or like the Murloc that buffs other Murlocs, or like there's a million things. These cards are not designed with Echo in mind. So when you give it Echo, you can get broken things. It's like that unstable evolution thing, right? Like you can unstable evolution into that whatever elemental, the priest elemental that makes your unstable evolutions cost 0. And then, or you can unstable evolution after you get a Archmage Arcanitis, or like the Auctioneer or whatever. Like, these are not intended interactions, and so this will break the game sometimes. Now, what this means is this is a card of crazy variance. It has a very high floor, which is why the card is rated high, because we hate crazy high variance. Like, we penalize that a lot because you can't rely on it as a good player. So this card does have that crazy high variance potential, but it also has a very high floor. So you're going to take it. It's good. It's going to be rated a 120. Like, it's a pretty damn good card.
Yeah.
All right, and so that's Priest. You have 2 card drawy kind of cards that make Priest go a little more control without actually giving it any control tools. Maybe it's not really control. Maybe it's more like making Priest go more attrition, which is fine because Priests don't really work as control right now very well. Although, with all the dragons coming in, who knows what Dustbreaker can do now. It's, again, these are not the number 1 cards I'm looking forward to playing, but it's like the Paladin, right? It gets the job done.
Yeah. Once again, it is annoying. Like, with Priest, they've settled into this sort of like, Priest is crazy. They could do what like the possibilities for Priest have just been expanding. Like, they steal stuff. They can always pull out something. They can flip tempo.
Wait, how is this different than any other class?
I would say with Priest, it's just more. The swings are wider, right, than a class, or like
Rogue,
even more unexpected.
Mage, Warlock, Shaman.
I would say it's not as bad right now. Like, I'm looking at historically when they had the Cabal classes, right? I would say Priest was just like even more crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And once they took away the Mean Streets of Gadgetzan expansion, it got a little bit better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Priests are definitely a lot more predictable now.
Priests are very predictable now.
Yeah,
Shadow Madness, and everything else is very predictable.
Right, and Scream on turn 7.
Sure.
But I will say, throughout the past like couple of years, like the way that they've been pushing Priest, it's just, I was gonna say unfun, but unfun for you is fun for someone else, I guess. But I just don't think it's been that healthy the way that they've been developing the Priest for Hearthstone in general. I think some people would agree with like.
I think before it was, but I think they've been fixing it. Like from Ungoro onwards, Priest has been fine.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of a dip in the old bucket, but like all the classes, all the cards here, right, are like ridiculous. So this is not like permanent design stuff. This is more like, and I don't think Priest is any more random than any other class, or any more like anything can happen, right? Like I think half the classes are like that. They're like literally half the classes are as bad as Priest. It's just Priest is part of the caster class and not the stable on the board classes, right? Like your druids, your paladins, and your warriors don't get as crazy in Arena.
Yep.
All the other classes kind of do.
Okay.
Okay. Speaking of one of these crazy classes, Rogue, which had a lot of crazy classes, a lot of crazy stuff.
Yep. First card is Thief of Futures. Thief of Futures is a 4-mana 4/3 with Battlecry. Add a copy of the top card of your opponent's deck to your hand.
See, anything can happen.
So not only do you draw a card, you know what their next draw is. Valuable information, right? But nothing insane, nothing crazy. Now you know a card that's coming up. But this isn't anything new. Yeah. I think we have this kind of close to a Yeti level.
Yeah,
right?
It's a little above a Yeti. We've seen this card before, right? Like, it's essentially a better version of that Priest card. That was a 4/3 and gave you a card. This does the same thing, except now you also have a read on your opponent's next top deck. Okay, next is Deja Vu, which is a very roguey card. 1 mana, very good combo trigger. Discover a copy of a spell you played this game. Now, you're probably not going to play that many spells, and you would never use it to discover a coin. So you have a lot of control over what you get out of this card. And especially if you have this card on early, you can determine how you play your spells to get your good spell back, which means to get your backstab or your eviscerate back, because that's the spell that you want most likely. So I like it. It's the control aspect of it, I think, is what really sells it. It's also rogue. Your spells are generally pretty good. The ones you put in your deck anyway. Like, rogues have some pretty great spells. And they don't appear often enough. And they probably are, when they're talking about micro adjusts, I'm sure rogue is one of the classes that has like a permanent like micro adjust down for all of their top buckets. So this is a way to get those cards back. Which is weird, right? But I guess it makes sense. So what happens in this new event for Rogue when they want to make Rogue crazier and to make people actually want to play Rogue? Well, they give Rogue more of their old cards because that was fun, and they kind of stopped allowing that for a while.
Yep. So this is I'm looking at it. I think we scored at around a 120-ish, right?
And keep in mind, this includes the combo bonus. So I know we also said Ripple in Time was a 120. Ripple in Time is a better card, like, for itself, but rogues get adjusted up for like 1 mana stuff that you can just like play.
Yep.
All right, and so that's Rogue. I don't know if do you have any like overall comments on Rogue?
No, this is about as vanilla as we've seen them like offer cards for a class, right? Yeah. Like this is I'll call it like a expansion or an event of like crazy things, but for Rogue it's just what they do, more of what they do.
And it fits on the theme, right? It's an expansion of crazy things, but mostly in the neutral category. Like, the craziness in the classes are really like kind of limited. And we're going to get to the crazier classes after this, but you'll see that we had a crazy class in Hunter. We had a very RNG heavy and like somewhat powerful class in the Mage. And then the other 3 classes, like Druid was flat out bad. Paladin was like, and like Priest and Rogue are like, okay, right? Like, nothing's really happening there. So it is a crazy expansion, but the neutrals are driving the train, not really the class cards, even though everyone's always more excited about class cards. Maybe because they have more color on them or something. I don't know. Okay, so now let's go to the crazy stuff. Warlocks. Man. Rift Warden. Sorry.
Wait.
That is not what we're going to. We are not there yet. We are actually on Shaman. Master of Realities.
Okay, if you want to talk crazy, I think this might be like, this might take the crown of craziest card. I'm not saying like, most OP ever, but like just craziest card. Master of Realities, 6 mana, 5/7. So you're missing 1 stat, right? Missing 1 stat from what you should get.
Mm-hmm.
And after you summon a minion, emphasis on summon.
Including totems.
After you summon a minion, transform it into a random minion that costs 2 more. Oh my gosh.
So your hero power becomes summon a random 3 mana minion, and everything you play without a battle cry. First of all, summon a random minion that costs 1 more than your current minion is the, like, if you don't care about RNG and you're neutral to it, that's the fair thing. Like, if I take a random minion that I'm just putting onto the board and I turn it into another random minion that's 1 mana higher, that's even value.
That's only 1.
Yeah,
right.
That's even value. This goes 1 above that to make it good value, normally. Now, for a good player, you never want to take this RNG chance, so like maybe costing 2 more actually makes it even value for you, but it's kind of like shaky. Now, what that doesn't consider is the synergies, right? Like, anything with a battle cry, you will get a ton of value out of, because the battle cry still triggers, and then this thing transforms.
Yeah. So, let's say you play this, they're not able to kill it off because, let's be honest, it's not the easiest to kill off with 7 health, right? And then you play a Gnomish Inventor, right? Then you draw a card, and you play the 4 mana random.
Gnomish Inventor. Saronite Chain Gang.
I know, right? Like, I'm putting out the most innocuous sort of upside card. Yeah, you play Saronite Chain Gang and you get double random 6-drops.
Mm-hmm.
It's just insane. It's just absolutely crazy. we do penalize it a little bit for variance because the variance is so huge.
But again, like our value is not the value that your opponents are going to have. We do the tier list from the perspective of an infinite player. It's ranked pretty much where a Lich King is. If you are an average player getting 3 wins on average in the arena, this is worth a lot more to you. Like a lot more.
Yeah. So look, we have this at like Lich King levels, right? We have this at Lich King levels
for us, for people who hate RNG.
For people who absolutely hate RNG, it is like Lich King levels. I would say like,
just like if you're not an infinite player, just take this card when it's offered. I don't care what it's up against, unless it's like another RNG heavy card like Unstable Evolution, which we also hate, but is rated even higher than this card by like a lot because it's actually better than this card.
Yeah. So this is really insane. If you say I think that this is like a 200 card, I'd be like, okay, sure. Like you should definitely pick it, right? But yeah, once again, this is. I don't know why Blizzard decided to print this. Let's just move on to the next card, and then we can talk about it.
To be fair, this is like trolled and bait. So this card actually is potentially fun, I think, more than a lot of the other cards that are really randomly RNG and Blizzard like labeled it as fun. I'm like, who's really having that much fun with these cards? This one seems like it's slow enough that you're kind of in it for a while. And it does multiple crazy things that are very visible to both players on every, like, multiple times on each turn. So, this is probably, like, the closest to, like, okay, fine, it's a fun card. But yeah, but it's blatantly overpowered. Stasis Elemental, your other card from a Shaman, is a 4-mana 3/5, and it is an elemental. So Shamans get an additional elemental, and the battle cry says freeze a minion until this leaves the battlefield. So basically, it keeps a minion frozen as long as it's alive. Now, if it dies, like let's say on the very next turn, the other minion unfreezes, and so this guy basically had no effect. So it's not just purely better than freezing a minion.
No, but on average, it should be better, right? And just like I'm trying to envision how sort of the board plays out. This is going to be really awkward, you know? Like this is going to be really awkward, and on average, it will be better than just a normal freeze.
Definitely. It's also an elemental, and shamans are very good with these elemental things because assuming they didn't rebucket things, they still have one of the most underbucketed cards of the all times in that I don't even know what it's called. It's the thing that buffs elementals and gives elementals plus like gives you another elemental.
Earthen Might.
Yeah. Something like that. Really? I thought Earthen Might was the druid card that gave +1/+1 and armor. Is that Earthen something else?
That's Earthen Scales.
Okay. All these names. Not my strong suit. Okay, anyway, we gave it a 120. It's definitely better than Yeti, but not exactly a premium card.
Yep.
Okay. So that's Shaman. You should play Shaman. It's probably the most fun class.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Look, I think Tachi and Shady have proven that Shaman is a good class, right? Like they have played Shaman a lot. Like so before this event, Shaman was already established to be quite good, and they got one of the best cards, and definitely the craziest card. And then their second card is still quite good, right? Like pretty good. So Shamans definitely came out very well in this event.
Yep. Let's move on to Warlock. So again, you'll notice like Hunters are not good. They got better cards. Shamans were not good, or like their averages were not good at least. Even if for a very good player, they can be good if you draft them in certain ways and play them certain ways. You're going to see Warlock, which was not that good, although now the win rates have gone up even before the event happened. So Warlocks are going to be pretty good as well, and then you're going to see Warriors be pretty good as well in terms of the cards that they get. So I don't know if Blizzard did this intentionally or not, but these cards certainly do like help arena balance among classes, even as it makes skill less relevant. Rift Warden is what we'll start with for Warlock. It's not a terribly exciting card. It's a 7 mana 5/5. You discard a random minion. That's your battle cry. Your death rattle is you summon it. So,
on average, look, 7 mana, you get the 5/5 immediately, and then you're able to sort of bank this other minion that you discard, right? So on average, like the stats that you get are good for 7 mana.
Yeah.
Good for 7 mana, and you can certainly try in some ways to cheat out a big minion, right? Like a Violent Worm, for example. That would be really good. But once again, the initial body costs 7 mana, and it doesn't do anything. And you have to kill it, right? Like, so it has Summoning Sickness, and then you have to kill it off. It's definitely exploitable. So it can get good value. It doesn't do what Warlocks really want stuff to do, which is like Warlocks want to front load stats, right? They want to front load stats. That's why Doomguard is so good, because you front load stats in order to protect your health and in order to, kind of be able to hero power. This, what it does is it backloads the stats pretty heavily, and there's a slight RNG aspect.
Yeah, and it doesn't even give you like a good body to kill off.
No.
Like, even if it's injured, you still like a 5/2. You don't want to like sacrifice that just to like trigger the death rattle. Like, obviously it's a thing to do, but you're still taking a pretty hefty penalty to it. You'd rather sacrifice like a 1/1. But when it hits like a good minion, like let's say anything 5-drop or above, it does get a lot of value. So we have this like also above a Yeti. It's also a dragon on top of that, and dragon synergies are going to be very important in this thing. So that's Rift Warden. Grasp the Future is the next one, and Grasp the Future is 4 mana, draw 2 cards, they cost 2 less. Reminds you of Primordial Glyph, but you don't get to discover a random spell, you just like draw from your deck, and it's more clunky at 4 mana rather than 2. It also means you can't bank mana at 2, which is a good thing to do as mage. So Primordial Glyph is like almost a 200 on our tier list, even in the new tier list when the scores are generally a little lower. So Primordial Glyph, in our opinion, is one of the best cards in the entire game because of the flexibility that it offers to a good player. And as well as its ability to kind of fill in for your curve on 2. This card may look like that card, but it doesn't quite do the same thing. You don't get to choose where you're saving the mana. It's clunkier to play out. And worst of all, you're in Warlock, where drawing cards is just not as important. And this one draws an extra one, right? So it has like a lot of card advantage. That's not exactly what you're looking for as a Warlock.
Yep. So it's still good. It's still a good card. It's just not the... it comes up short against its, natural comparison to Primordial Glyph.
It's still a premium card,
ways.
Right? Yeah. But maybe don't take it over a Dreadlord, or like consider it, right? If it's like next to a Doomguard or something, that's like around the value that I think this card is.
Oh yeah, I would take Dreadlord every single time over this.
Yeah,
I think Dreadlord is also just like way too good, right? But yeah, this card is very good, very very good.
Draconic Herald. Sorry. So we're done with Warlocks. Anything to really say about Warlocks?
No, not really. Warlocks got what Warlocks want are stuff that they recently got. Stuff like Vulgar Homunculus, right? And their spellstones were fantastic for them.
Yes.
This kind of stuff is like, yeah, the flavor is Warlock, but it's not what Warlock really wants. And what they really need, right? Like, do they need Grasp the Future? Like, that's not really what they want. They certainly don't want something like Rift Warden. It's not a bad card. It's just like, it doesn't help them as much as, some of these other cards, like, help the classes, like Chrono Shot, right? Chrono Shot is sort of like every hunter's dream, and they got it.
Yeah.
No Warlock player was like, oh, I really need Rift Warden. I really need Grasp the Future. These are not some things that like were missing really in the Warlock's toolkit, and they're happy that they got. So decent cards, but it doesn't really push Warlock up, especially with some of the other classes. The Shaman, the Hunters, like that we've seen really improve with the event cards.
Yep. Okay, so let's finish this off with Warrior. Warrior has a weapon, but we'll get to that later. Let's start with a non-weapon. Draconic Herald. Draconic Herald is a 6-mana 5/6 dragon, so you lose a 1 tempo by playing it. But the battle cry says, discover a minion. Give it +3/+3, then put it on the top of your deck. So that's what you're going to draw next. On the downside, it means you're not going to draw a spell. On the plus side, it means you get to over tempo by 3 to make up for your 1 tempo of loss, like on the very next turn. And it's not like your opponent sees this minion or anything, and why would you ever pick a minion you don't plan on playing the next turn? So you're going to get everything back the next turn and then some. But you lose a little on curve.
Yeah. So look, this card it's good. It's better than a Yeti. One of the points that we compare it to. We have it around like a 115-ish,
yep.
Right? The problem with this card, once again, it's Warriors are another one of those classes in which they want the stats up front, right? And this it's not as stagnant as some of these other sort of high value cards in which you can just discover like a Kor'kron Elite, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can discover these very fast minions as well, like Militia Commander. That's a good one to discover with +3/+3. But at the same time, Warriors, the best cards are ones in which they over tempo, in which they have initiative, right? With this one, yeah, you get the +3/+3 eventually, but you cut a little bit of stats. The initial body doesn't have taunt, it doesn't do anything. And like you said, sometimes you just really need that weapon or you really need that spell, and you cut that out of your next draw, right? You actually make it impossible for you to top deck that Arcanite Reaper, to top deck that Blood Reaver, Blood Razor. So yeah, like better than Yeti. Good card, but small things that hold it back from actually being that great.
Yep. And now the final card is the weapon, Fate Cleaver, 4 mana, 4/2 weapon. It's like a death. What was that card? Death something? That used to be a card. Death Spite. There we go. It's like back in the day. Nax out. Death Spite, except it doesn't have the death rattle, and instead it kills all copies of a minion wherever they are. So it's a good counter to the infinite stuff.
Oh yeah.
It can, potentially like stop a Saturday Chain Gang better than normal, but it's kind of more of a very specific counter that you're not going to see too often.
Right.
Instead, it's basically a 4 mana 4/2 weapon, which is very good. Just period, like True Silver, even if it doesn't heal. So it's a good card. And these cards, just to give you an idea of how good these cards are when it comes to like True Silver or whatever, they're Lich King level. Like your Arcanite Reapers, your Fate Cleavers, maybe not a War Axe, but War Axe will get close to it. They're almost at Lich King levels. They're like within 10 points of a Lich King.
I think most people would agree. If you play Arena for long enough, it's not as flashy, but weapons are just amazing in terms of the amount of tempo that you're able to take off a board with 2 swings of Arcanite Reaper, or just a delayed Pyroblast, right? It's really amazing. And with Fate Cleaver, like you're getting what you expect. It's just a slightly smaller Arcanite Reaper. The effect is sometimes going to hurt you as well, right? Like, if you kill off a Yeti on their side, but you have a Yeti in your hand, that's really bad, right? So you can't really kill it off with a Fate Cleaver. You have to try to get rid of the Yeti some other way, unless you just are okay losing your own Yeti. So it's awkward sometimes. Otherwise, like during other times, it'll be really good. Like they have a Star Knight Chain Gang, right? You fake quiver.
Someone in chat just pointed out dudes. I didn't even think of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
paladin dudes. You don't really want to be using it to hit a dude, but
exactly.
like still, right? It's an option.
Still, it's a thing, right? If you don't have the Blood Razor, sure, yeah, kill dudes off, and especially if they get the whole level up synergy, right? And then you fake Cleaver, and then you
and God knows Ripple and Time from the priest. That priest card needs a counter, right?
Yeah. So look, this is just gonna be good. The effect is gonna. It's not a major selling point of it. You'll hit it sometimes, and sometimes it'll be awkward, but you should look at it 95% of the time as just a 4-mana 4/2 weapon, and that's really freaking good because this is arena and
offering bonus.
Yeah, and those kinds of weapons are just amazing.
Not just a normal offering bonus for being a class card, but also for being a spell/weapon. And you want to get those spell stones running. Spell stones are going to be much better now than they were.
Yep. Okay. Look, that is Warrior. Warrior, if you look at the win rate, they weren't in a great spot, right? I think like we liked where Warrior was at. I thought it was fine. We both did fairly well with Warrior in this meta. And the cards that they added, it doesn't change their game plan. I like the fact that they gave them another weapon, right? And now with the buckets, you can either take the weapons or you don't take the weapons. It's like a lot less awkward now. Like, so you can always find that sweet spot. And just another option in terms of weapons is very welcomed. Yep. The dragon is a bit underwhelming, especially when you look at some of the minions that other classes got, right? But it's definitely playable. It's above average, and yeah, I think Warrior will be okay. It's just a lot of what's going to happen is like how many of the really good neutral cards can you draft, right?
Yeah, that's where it's going to be. Like this whole entire thing, meta-wise, if we're going to wrap up this whole discussion and talk about the how the meta is going to be impacted, it's the neutral cards. And the neutral cards are the cards that are unfortunately the problematic ones, in terms of almost all of them have a pretty heavy RNG element. And quite a number of them are really, really good, and you'll see a lot of them because they're neutral, and you'll see them in every single kind of like game. And enough of them will have a effect in the arena. So I am very happy to find out that Morozond, and especially Morozond, but also Chromie are legendaries. So the impact won't be as terrible to the arena as I suspected. Because I remember when I first saw these cards, I was like, oh crap, this is going to go on for 3 weeks. Like, I'm going to have fun for 1 week, struggle through the second week, and there's no way I'm going to be here for the third week. But with Morozond and Chromie as legendaries, I think it's like a little more in control than it was before. Like before it was like, this is a stupid thing to do to the arena, period. Now it's like, okay, so they're just upping the RNG to like a very high level. Obviously, no good player should like this meta. In terms of trying to apply skill to the arena, it's certainly a very huge blow, but that's not the point of these cards. And it's very obvious that's not the point of these cards. So,
yep. All right.
Like,
so,
do you want to? Go ahead.
Can I complain now?
Oh, you want to complain? Okay, let's complain first, and then we'll talk about how to do well in this meta.
Oh, okay.
Basically, how to like fight in a very RNG and swingy meta.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. So, how far are we into this? We are 2 hours in. All right. Now is when the complaint begins. Brace yourselves. Why? Why?
Fun.
Okay. So look, this event is going to last for 3 weeks, right? It's going to last for 3 weeks. And essentially, if you want to do the leaderboards, which none of us are doing, but if you out there want to do the leaderboard or just enjoy the arena, you are heavily impacted by this event. And the thing with this event is we knew going in, look, they're going to make these cards and they are going to make sure these cards are prevalent.
Yes.
That's
and they have a plus 100% bonus, it seems.
Right. And with so many of these cards, like throughout this entire list, the comparison point was Lich King, right?
Yep.
The comparison point was Lich King because
so literally the comparison point for a quarter of these cards was Lich King.
Right. Because a lot of these cards, they were either comparable to Lich King, better than Lich King, or like, it's like, oh, okay, it's halfway between Yeti and Lich King, but closer to Lich King than it is to Yeti, right? A lot of the cards were there. And it's just like, here's the thing. Blizzard can do whatever the hell they want with their format. It's their game. They make money from it. But from players who take the arena seriously, and this is why we have a 2-hour podcast about it, people like Shady Bunny as well, who was not as happy about this. I think that's a fair categorization. It's like when you introduce stuff like this, you basically are saying we are making Arena into Tavern Brawl 2.0, right?
Yep.
It's a paid Tavern Brawl.
It's a more complicated paid Tavern Brawl, and it's going to last 3 weeks.
It's going to last 3 weeks, and it essentially takes away the format that we like.
Exactly. That's the big problem. I think a lot of people come in and they're like, oh, but this could be fun. Sure, it could be fun. Tavern Brawls could be fun. I don't play Tavern Brawls. A lot of Arena players that I know, most Arena players I know, don't play Tavern Brawls because Tavern Brawls are a different beast altogether. And one thing that Blizzard knows about Tavern Brawl that they've established from the very beginning as part of their core philosophies on what actually constitutes fun to human beings who play this game is that Tavern Brawls are 1 week and then they change. Because when you have something casual like that, that's what you do. So Blizzard's done 2 things with this format. One is that it's made a 3-week Tavern Brawl, which they know not to do. This is not something we have to tell them. That's why Tavern Brawls are 1 week. They could have saved themselves a lot of effort, right? If they just made Tavern Brawls even 2 weeks. That literally saves them half the work on Tavern Brawl. They didn't do it. And they didn't do it for a good reason. Because they did some research, because they tested on people, and they said, oh, I guess 1 week is the best length for us to do Tavern Brawls, and we will actually spend the resources on it. And then the other side of the coin is not just that this format's going to suck by week 3, and it's going to be iffy by week 2. It's that you've taken away the actual competitive limit, the more competitive limited format that at least a sizable portion of your population likes. Right? Yeah. When Crip was making videos and complaining about stuff, his number one complaint wasn't really anything too technical. It was just that, the decks are too good. If I wanted to play very, synergized or whatever, good decks that are operating at this power level, I would play Constructed. And that's fair. That's the reason why a lot of people play Arena. Well, what's happening here, you're not getting Constructed cards, so you would play this instead of Constructed if you want these new cards, but you're playing really powerful swingy games. That's not the limited game. It's more Blizzard not understanding the appeal of limited to limited players, and more Blizzard doing things to limited to appeal to the people they understand a lot better, which are Constructed players. And they've shown this repeatedly again and again. And the vast majority, probably everyone on the development team, is more of a Constructed player than a limited player. And it seeps through. They don't have the voice sitting there, or an important voice sitting there when they're doing these limited format updates being hey, there are limited players that presumably you care somewhat about, and they're going to find very little of this super fun for 3 weeks. You should probably let them have their game mode. I don't know. Just a thought. And instead, it's a lot of, hey, this will be fun for the casual people. Hey, Constructed players will like this more. Hey, it'll get more people in the arena. And we want more people in the arena, right? We always talk about that. Arena players will like that too, right? Because it shakes things up. They keep talking about shaking things up. They keep talking about getting more players in the arena. This will help all of that. And all of that is true. But the way they do it is very it's you go to places, let's say you're a king, right? You're a dictator, and you're told your people are unhappy. Let's make them happy. Well, if you're someone who really enjoys sports, you would say, well, let's build more stadiums in every major and minor city and have more sports. Let's make basketball year-round and football year-round. That'll keep the morale up. But then there's the people, maybe a minority of people, but a segment of your population that don't like sports. and you taking more zones and making them sports zones and creating more sports stuff and taking away what they like. Maybe they like music, maybe they like, I don't know, other stuff, maybe they like to play Hearthstone. It's not going to help them, right? So
here is what I see as kind of the issue, right? In terms of, look, whenever Blizzard makes a change to Arena, either by making a change in drafting or by introducing an event, right? I always sort of look at it in terms of, what does this do for the Arena, right? Not what is the effect on the Arena? Like, what does it actually do? How does it sort of further the Arena?
Yeah.
So if you just look at the effects, there are some things that they have done that have had not so great effects, like changing the drafting into buckets, right? It frustrated a lot of people, right? A lot of the complaints that we saw was drafts are all the same, we had the Steed meta for a while, and that wasn't really because of buckets, but that's sort of what the effect was. However,
buckets made it worse.
Yeah. However, the idea behind it is like, look, we have this fundamental idea of drafting, and we want drafting to be more involved, right? And this furthers the Arena because
it builds upon something. It gets somewhere. There's a goal. There's a vision.
Right. And even though, implementing it we were going to have rough spots, you and I, we're always saying, look, this idea is good. The implementation, it's going to be all over the place for a while, but the idea is good. Now, what does an event like this do? Some people will have a lot of fun with it. There's no denying, right? Some people will have a lot of fun with it. But how does it further the Arena?
Like, who's it getting into the Arena? Are the people that are attracted by this event coming to the Arena and staying once these crazy cards go away and we get a more stable, normal meta where all these good players in May got insane win rates? Also known as normal, somewhat competitive Arena. Are they really going to stay around? Maybe, but I think the rate of people sticking around is not going to be terribly high. Like, right. I feel like this is like a bigger brawl that they didn't call a brawl. So Blizzard basically had two things they could have done with something along the lines of what this thing is. They could have made it into a brawl, or they could have changed it into the Arena. By making it into a brawl, what they would do is keep Arena the same. By making it into an Arena event, what they do is they keep brawls the same. So they've literally made a decision to get rid of Arena in favor of continuing to have weekly brawls, assuming they couldn't keep everything. And this event, which is a great idea for them, and it's going to be very fun for a lot of people, like most people even, assuming this event was going to happen in some format, right? Like, maybe it's not like an Arena draft, maybe it's just like we give you some cards or a deck or whatever.
Right. So, and I see this question being posed in the chat, and I want to make this clear, because one of the questions is like, it's like, well, why does it need to further the Arena, right? It's like, people have fun with it. The important thing is, this takes away from what we know as the Arena, right? And that has, I think, some heavy implications.
This is not Arena.
It's not Arena.
This is not a limited format. This is like a brawl format.
Right.
Once you get past a certain amount of swinginess, you're not in a not even like a roughly controllable space. And this, I don't know if it's like over the line, but it's right on the line if it's not over. Like, I haven't been in it and seen what the offering bonus is actually doing and see what all the RNG is doing. But from the review of the RNG and seeing the percent of RNG go up and the quality of these cards, it's getting us closer to that.
Right. So I think a good example of this, let's just put it into other games, right? Because I think some of the critics are some of the people that don't see Arena as an actual format. And if you don't see that, then we just don't see eye to eye, right? But let's say, look, if you play StarCraft, if you play Overwatch, this is essentially like you going on StarCraft ladder and them saying, for 3 weeks, it's only big game hunter maps, right?
Fun.
It's fun. Everyone has unlimited resources. One base.
Yeah.
But for 3 weeks, we're taking away the normal sort of maps.
Screw the normal maps.
Or for Overwatch, for 3 weeks in when you queue up for competitive, everyone has 200 health. You build up ult 200% faster. You move 2 times faster. Something like that, right? it's fun. People have fun with it. But I think you're kind of getting now the problem with it. It takes away from the format in which it changes and it devalues it. Now, once again, if you are saying, I don't see Arena as a valid format, then
right, the only valid format in Hearthstone is constructed, and tournaments been constructed, then fine, then we're just coming from different points of view. We think every card game has a limited format that is like competitive, or should have a limited format that's competitive, if not multiple limited formats that are competitive.
Right.
And Blizzard has never really had that, and this event moves very far away from that. Like, they literally decided to take away Arena instead of take away Brawl. Like, how much more of a slap in the face is that?
Right. And once again, I see people saying like, oh, but Arena is not a format. So once again, look, we disagree about that, right?
No, but that's how I think they're right in terms of that's what Blizzard thinks.
Right.
That they're like, actions speak louder than words, right? What is Blizzard doing? They're treating Arena not as a very serious format.
And what are we, sitting here, myself and Adwicta, like, why do we do this podcast? Why do we do the Coop? Why do we do the tier list, which takes so much freaking time? Because we look at it as a competitive format, and we have seen a lot of other people see it as a competitive format as well. Shady takes it very seriously. Dreads, Hafu, Crip, Amaz, they take it very seriously. They enjoy it. And we hope, we all hope, and the Arena community hopes that it will be something bigger. And something like this just takes away from it, right?
I don't even care if it's bigger. Just let me play a limited format in Hearthstone. There's no, like, actual, like, I don't know a better way to say it, but like a normal-ish limited format in Hearthstone right now. There isn't. There was in whatever perfect or imperfect form you think Arena was, but it's gonna be gone for 3 weeks. It's not even just gonna be gone for 1 week, right? Like, even like Overwatch has like seasons or whatever, and even in Overwatch they say like they used to be a 1 month pause, and then they're like, oh, that's too much time off, and then they made it 2 weeks, and then they're like, even within the 2 weeks you can do stuff that's pretty much like competitive because people want it, right? You can't just take away competitive for that long. It comes to the root of the problem, right? You talk past each other a lot when you have this conversation, which is like people who are like, oh, but it's Arena, when we're like, yeah, but that's all Arena. You got. It's not like I'm in love with the Arena for the sake of the Arena. It's you don't have anything besides Arena. This is the closest you have to a legitimate limited format, and you're gonna take that away. And again, this is not the same. This is not the same kind of adding cards to the Arena that they did during like BlizzCon, and I think it came in January, right, where they added 1 card to each class. And some of those cards are pretty crazy too. Those cards are actually like. Some of those cards were legitimately better than the cards introduced here. Like, I think the overall value of the cards here, the ceiling, is not like too high or anything. The problem is the RNG swing. The problematic cards that were introduced previously were not RNG swing cards. They were very much just like regular meat and potatoes cards that were just overpowered. That is, in many ways, to a competitive player, preferable to just having a swing determined by uncontrollable RNG, which is what like almost all of these cards have. And you can tell by the mascot that they chose for this event that this is exactly what they're going for, right? They chose the Time Tinkerer, who, if you played Monster Hunt, was the guy who literally had all the RNG cards and had the hero power that reset your turn so you could try your RNG again. Like, that's what the event is. This is the thing that they're going for in the theme.
Yep. So, okay, that's basically it. I think we've expressed ourselves, and a lot of our frustrations and, the sort of complaint, it's just a variant of kind of what Blizzard, of other complaints that we've lodged, because Blizzard kind of does the same thing, right? Up to this point, we've seen them treat Arena as kind of a just Tavern Brawl 2.0, or sort of a like a beta test. And that obviously doesn't make me happy. Once again, they can do whatever they want. It's their game. But I think a lot of people see Arena as a heavily competitive and skill-intensive format with a lot of area for growth. And certainly we do. And it is just very disappointing to have, an event like this in which, yes, people have fun, but it not only doesn't add to arena, like the competitive standard arena that we know, it literally takes it away for 3 weeks.
All right. Yeah, so I think did you have anything else you wanted to add to this?
No, that was basically it. Other than that, I think we laid out the cards. We talked about a lot of the pros and cons, and it was interesting. I think definitely unexpected, right? No one really expected an event as big as this.
Right. I think we expected an event of some sort, but this is kind of huge. They made like almost 30 like new cards with art and presumably sounds and everything. But yeah, we're gonna go and play a run in this on the European server after this. So thank you guys for listening. This is the Lightforge podcast, and we'll go back to a normal Lightforge next week while we kind of like examine the meta that these cards will have put us in. But before we get there, I want to end with a little bit on how to actually play in this kind of meta. We talked about what the meta is, which is a lot of RNG, a lot of big swings, and it's coming from neutral cards, so it's going to be pretty much every game. This is a general rule for what happens when swings get big. In Hearthstone, a 2-tempo swing is a normal swing. Anything larger than 2-tempo is a large swing. Anything larger than 4-tempo is an insane swing. That is a game-winning swing that will actually invalidate most of what you do for the game up till then. Because normally when you like trade minions well, or when you correctly predict your opponent's minions and play a minion in retaliation to that, you gain like 1 or 2 tempo. So something that like takes, let's say, like 5 or 6 tempo away from you negates 3 of your good moves versus 3 of your opponent's bad moves. And the game is won, and like over the course of a game, you may, especially when you're playing against like players who know what they're doing, like players who are like 5 wins or more on average, you're only going to have like a handful of these decision-making points in a game that will actually impact the outcome. So you'll have like a 10 mana swing altogether, and this will wipe out more than half of it. So the way to deal with that, as a good player who's trying to limit what these kind of swings can do, is you absolutely need to protect yourself from these swings by not being efficient. This is why this is such a horrible, like, this is a horrible meta, right? Like, whenever the RNG goes high, whenever the swings goes high, because if you are efficient, you are using resources. When a swing happens, the only way to come back, assuming you don't have enough face damage already, so one way to deal with the swing is just to get a lot of face damage really, really quickly, right? Like, if you're an aggro deck, you're kind of an aggro deck, right? You don't do anything different. But if you're anything besides an aggro deck, or put in the position of being a very aggressive thing because your opponent's playing too much control, what you need to do is to be inefficient and save any kind of tempo that you can have. So if a card, for example, is a 4 mana 5/5 and another card is a 4 mana 4/4, you play the 4 mana 4/4 if you're up on the board, not the 4 mana 5/5. You normally play the 4 mana 5/5. If you have a way of like glyphing to bank a mana, don't play the card you glyph. Save it. Because whenever the swing happens, you need to swing back, or else your opponent snowballs from there. So you need a swing stopper, but since you can't actually stop swing in the arena, that's why it's like fun, because your opponent can come back at any time, and you can destroy them at any time too. You need to save that kind of stuff. And with this expansion, a lot of the things added are not like removals. They're like card draws. You have way more card draws added than removals. You have way more minions with abilities on the board than you have like removals. So you really have to save your cards with initiative. Like, you save them to remove your opponent's cards that would swing or snowball out from you. And there is no such thing as too much card advantage, because your swings, again, normally if you have a 2-card card advantage, you're good in a normal meta. We're already kind of above that even before these cards were introduced, but you're normally safe if you had a 4-card card advantage. You're not safe no matter how much card advantage you have on your opponent. So card advantage is a resource throughout the entire game now in this new meta. So yeah, keep those thoughts in mind. That's the big adjustment I think you should be making in your gameplay to deal with a meta like this, and to keep up your win rate as much as possible in these conditions.
Yep. All right. I think we've been going for long enough. To those of you guys playing, I'm sure it'll be quite a surprise the first couple of runs. I know I would not be expecting all of the craziness. We'll have a lot of stories to tell. And yeah, we'll just see how it pans out, right?
Yeah.
A lot of cards. Going to be lots of swings, lots of wild cards, right? Lots of cards from the past. I think that's what they use. So
yeah, welcome to the I'm going to call it the time meta, and we'll delve deeper into it on the next Lightforge next week. Until then, see you guys. This is Adwikta.
This is Merps. Good luck in the arena.